If you like the video, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment for more videos like this.
To all outdoorsmen and forest explorers, what's the creepiest creature or strange sighting you've had in the deep woods or haunted forests, one that made you never want to return?
Strange events occur in the forest behind my home. It's been a while since the incident happened, but I still think a lot about it and wonder what exactly it was. I live in western Kentucky, and I have 2 dogs, both labs. About this time last year, they started acting funny and just staring off into the woods behind my house. My mom let them out to run around, and they bolted off into the woods like they were chasing something. Almost immediately after they ran off into the trees, they came running back with their tails between their legs, visibly shaken by something. After that, they refused to go into the woods and would just stare and bark at seemingly nothing and get very agitated. Then one night, after that had gone on for a while, I went to my back door and turned on the porch light to see if my cat was out and wanted in. And just off the porch I saw a huge animal or creature or something with white fur and eyes that glowed in the light run off into the darkness past the porch lights. It really freaked me out, and I went and grabbed a flashlight, my phone, and a knife and went outside to see if whatever it was still out there, but couldn't find anything. About a week after that, the dogs went back to normal, and they haven't had any problem with the woods anymore. The only logical explanation I can think of is my neighbors about a mile down the road have a white lab, but she's nowhere near as big as what I saw, and she never comes over to our house, so I've been left wondering what it was I saw. Hunting and seeing something unexplainable. I was hunting on my property in a tree stand when all of a sudden I saw 2 sets of eyes 5 feet from each other. It was pitch black when I saw them. Then instantly the pair of yellow/reddish eyes came together next to each other side by side, crouched down at the same time like they were one being, and came 10 feet closer to me. I jumped out of the tree stand and ran back to my house. I can't find anything explaining what creature or being I saw. Does anyone have an idea or explanation? Heard a whistle late at night. Last night my boyfriend and I were headed home and got a flat tire. This was around midnight, and we were on a highway, so we immediately got off at an exit in the middle of nowhere, and he got to changing the tire. It was dark, the only light we had was the headlights and our phone. I was very paranoid, and I kept telling my boyfriend I heard things and I felt weird because it was so lonely. But we shook it off with me just being paranoid. The whole time we were there, I felt so paranoid and anxious, but my boyfriend was trying to calm me down so he could just change the tire and leave. I was on the lookout with my flashlight the whole time. Finally, after 30 minutes of being out there, he was finished with the tire. He told me to put something up in the car, and as soon as I went back to him, he yelled at me to get the duck in the car, and I immediately went in the car and was just in full panic mode. The whole car was moving from the trunk, and I just heard banging. I kept trying to look back and forth to see where my boyfriend was and if I saw someone, but honestly, it's such a blur I can't even remember most of it anymore. Thankfully my boyfriend immediately comes in the car, and we rush out of there. He proceeds to tell me that he had heard a whistle from a thorn bush in front of us as if someone was calling him. And that he saw jeans and a body figure right behind it when he heard the whistle, and that he immediately picked up the flat tire and was forcing it in the trunk. We were terrified and still are because we were at that location for 30 minutes. So I don't know if a person was just staring at us the whole time, but also, if there was, why? Wouldn't they have done something by then? I wish I had looked out when we left to see if there was any movement or if I saw anyone, but we were just in full panic mode, and he literally had chills all over his body. My boyfriend did say when he was forcibly closing the trunk he had a crowbar and didn't see anyone come out, but it was fast and a blur, he didn't exactly see anything else. I truly do believe he saw something because he felt like it was a life or death situation and that his body took a screenshot. We aren't sure what that whistle was, but we are thankful nothing happened, and we are definitely never stopping in the middle of nowhere at night, ever. A friend said that it could have been his guardian angel looking out for him from that whistle to leave immediately, but yeah, this was definitely the scariest experience we've had. I have this little experience I and my friend had that I wanted to share. I want to share my story and get it off my chest. My friend and I went out into the wilderness of Denmark around 2 a.m. We climbed an observation tower and spotted one of the 2 lakes nearby. We decided we wanted to see them up close, so we descended from the tower and started walking through the rough terrain of the bog. Not far into the bog, I noticed a figure standing still. And this is when things started getting strange. Initially, I believed it was merely a sign related to the bog, possibly resembling a cow, but when I looked again, the figure had transformed. It now appeared to be the size of an average adult man, and its position had shifted. Naturally, both of us started to feel uneasy, so we stopped and stared. Unbelievably, the figure began to move. I signaled to my friend to duck, and we began discussing how to get out of the situation. While trying to figure out what to do, the figure kept changing position, getting closer, then moving farther away again. It was fast, quiet, and moved without a sound. It made strange noises that I can't even describe. When I finally saw it up close, I was horrified. It was the most terrifying thing I've ever seen, and I wish I could forget it. Its skin was pale, and its body was horribly deformed, too deformed to move normally. But somehow, it still moved long, unnaturally thin arms and legs that bent in strange ways. At that point, we decided we couldn't stay any longer. We had to run. When we re-examined, the figure had vanished. When we stood up, it suddenly rose about 3 meters away from us. It had been right there only moments before, and we hadn't heard a sound or seen it move. We had a standoff with it for what felt like 2 minutes. I was too scared to move. It paced back and forth, almost like it was studying us. Finally, my friend and I ran for the car. We jumped in, locked the doors, and drove off. We haven't been back since, and we have no intention of ever going back. Turkey Run State Park in Indiana. I and a friend went camping and felt uneasy from the moment we got there. There was nothing we could really put our finger on, but it just felt strangely eerie, too quiet, and like we were being watched. We are both experienced campers who have spent plenty of time sleeping in the woods, and I wouldn't say either of us is easily spooked. But we just grew more and more uneasy as the night went on. We were in a campground with probably 20 tent pads, and we were the only ones there. One family in a station wagon drove in during the afternoon, parked at a site, then reversed and left after a minute. We set everything up and got ready for dinner. It took us an unusually long time to get a fire started. It also felt like it got dark so quickly. It was extremely quiet, like way quieter than the forest usually is. We were eating our dinner when we heard some branches snapping on a half-hidden trail right behind our site. Neither of us had wanted to explore it during the day. We looked at each other, heard one more big branch snap way too close, and we jumped up and started packing without a word. We both felt like something had been stalking or watching us all day long. It was the only time in my life I can say I've had that intense gut feeling, completely unexplainable, where all my senses were screaming at me to get out now. We drove 3 hours home after dark and spent the night together in her apartment because we were both still so spooked. Later, we discovered that a serial killer had been active about 100 years ago, targeting women he lured alone into those woods. It just added another element of scary. Large, bright green eyes at night in a wooded area, 8 to 9 feet tall. This happened to my friend some years ago, and it has perplexed us ever since. I still haven't found a logical explanation for it. She was walking her dog in a wooded area at night with only her phone torch. She saw a pair of large, bright green eyes around 3 meters in front of her, standing approximately 8 to 9 feet tall. They blinked twice in rapid succession. I was on the phone to her at the time, and the absolute fear in her voice was real. It gave me goosebumps. I have never heard her so scared/disturbed. She is accustomed to walking in the darkness at night and remains unflappable. The eyes were in the center of the path, and there were no solid branches or bushes surrounding the path where an animal could have perched. I revisited the spot with her in the day. Just very twig-thin bushes and branches. She always comments on how large and bright they were and said they were closer together than humans, much larger, and the color was comparable to that of night vision green. She couldn't tell if there was a dark figure/body attached. It was pitch black and her phone light was pointed down. She turned around and ran. Do you have any insights or similar experiences to share? I was out after dark with my dog. We were out back closing up our shop, chicken coop, etc. As many have said before, my grandma and pawpaw taught me not to whistle at night. I lost sight of my pup and, without thinking, gave a small but high-pitched whistle to call her back. It's the first and last time I'll ever make that mistake again. I know better, but it was just a knee-jerk reaction wanting to keep my dog from wandering too far. Up to then, there were the usual noises out in the woods. The last few skitterings of squirrels. We have an owl that comes by every couple of nights, some wind but nothing crazy. After I whistled, everything froze. I started moving quickly back to the house, and that's when I heard it. A high-pitched, long whistle comes from somewhere deep in the woods behind our house. It almost seemed to echo a little, like it was a good ways off. The next night, just as the sun was setting, I was working in the shop, and I heard a loud snarling growl sound. I was on edge from the night before but also thought maybe something saw an opportunity to try to grab a chicken or two. I went to investigate and didn't see anything, so I locked up and walked to the house. Just before I got inside, I heard something like a woman screaming, but just something about it didn't sound right. I can't put my finger on it, but it wasn't natural. We didn't know what else to do, so we called the cops. They came out and walked the property. Nothing. No tracks, no noise, nothing out of place. Just nothing. Lesson learned. Listen to Grandma. My girlfriend and I encountered something very strange this weekend. We trail run. It's sort of become our thing. Yesterday, we found a trailhead that was up toward the mountains, about 2 hours away from Seattle, pretty remote. So we left early and got to the trailhead at 8 a.m. The trail was particularly difficult. Steep enough that we found ourselves walking pretty often. In retrospect, we should have been surprised by what we saw next. Midway through our run, on a steep descent, we pass a lone hiker and think absolutely nothing about the encounter. Alone, maybe 65 to 70, and wearing all white. The clothes were modern. Looked perfectly placed for today. Hiking pants, vest, hat. She had one hiking pole and a backpack. All white. Again, modern clothes didn't stand out as strange. We say hello, and she says nothing back. We were running, so there was nothing rude. We simply ran past her. We continue, it gets harder, but we progress nearly 3 miles uphill. We get to a point where the trail becomes an overgrown forest road in a small clearing. At this point, the road begins to get very, very overgrown. So we crest a small ridge, and suddenly we see a hiker. It's been 30 minutes since we saw the older lady in white. Yet, here was a hiker with the same outfit. There were no forks in our trail. Yet, we'd swear this was the same person. But that would be impossible, right? The gravity of this hasn't hit yet. So strangely, we ran past her again. We ran a couple of feet in front, at least, because at that point the road was entirely bushes and not passable. So we turn around. So we walked past her a last time. She says something like seems like the trail ends here. It didn't feel eerie, yet, in retrospect, it was eerie. We ran back. Everything seemed normal until we reflected on why this lady was there. How would she have gotten there before us? How could she have even made it there at all? We just ran 5 miles uphill, steep terrain, and so did this 70-year-old lady? It's been a one-way path, there have been no other turns. The trail we were on at that point was completely overgrown. Enough that we had to turn around. Why was she there? How did she get there? Was she the same lady? When we ran back the same trail, we never ran into the first hiker. We are in the process of selling a large piece of land in eastern Washington. It's gorgeous and quiet, the flowers in spring are amazing. You can see for miles. I loved it because I love big, lonely places. Years and years ago there was an illegal grow op there, and the feds came and busted it up. This was ages before we bought it. Honestly, one of the reasons we decided to sell it was because we never felt welcome there. The vibes were awful. Anytime I got more than a few yards from our tent, I got absolutely creeped out. I always felt like someone was watching me. I was just so uncomfortable all the time. There were certain areas of the property that I avoided completely. I think places hold energy. Even when it's not a ghost or a spirit, there's still energy present. There's bad energy, and the best thing you can do is move on. The Night the Woods Knocked, a true story from Platkill, New York. So this is a story my dad told me that happened to him when he was 17, and honestly it still creeps me out. He grew up in Platkill, New York, and their house was this old 2-story place that my grandpa built way out in the woods. There were no neighbors within a mile, surrounded solely by trees. If you've ever been upstate, you know how isolated it can get. One night, while everyone else went to the city, my dad was left home alone. It was just him, a .22 shotgun, and their German shepherd, Prince, who was police trained and supposedly fearless. The land the house was on was already known for weird stuff. People said there was paranormal activity and even some Native American remains somewhere on the property. So one night, there's a crazy thunderstorm. Storms in upstate New York are intense, causing the entire house to tremble and the surrounding woods to turn completely black. My dad's just chilling, probably reading or listening to the radio, when out of nowhere, someone starts banging on the front door. They're not just knocking, but pounding, as if they're in a state of desperation or frustration. Here's the thing, there's literally nobody around for miles, and the driveway is long and muddy. No way someone just wandered up there, especially in a storm. As soon as the banging starts, Prince, the big, tough police dog, freaks out and bolts up the stairs, actually peeing on himself on the way up. My dad grabs the shotgun and follows him, and they end up barricaded in a bedroom on the 2nd floor, with Prince hiding under the bed shaking. My dad's sitting there thinking it could be a bear, but what bear knocks like that? And what if it could somehow get upstairs and break through the French doors? The pounding keeps going, mixed with thunder and wind, and my dad's just sitting there in the dark, shotgun ready, heart pounding. Eventually, the banging just stops. The storm dies down, and there's just this creepy silence. In the morning, my dad goes downstairs and checks the door. Nothing's broken, but there are these muddy prints on the porch. He said they were too big and weird to be human, but not really animal either. To this day, he has no idea what was out there, but he swears he's never seen Prince so scared before or since. So yeah, if you ever end up alone in a house in the woods during a thunderstorm and someone starts banging on the door, maybe just stay upstairs. A possible run-in with the little people of Alaska. I'm a protection ranger in Alaska. If you're not familiar with the term, it means that I am essentially a park ranger with federal authority-ish. This story goes back a few years. I was a ranger of 2 years at this time. 25 years old. Ambitious. Enjoying my life post-military. I want to say this and be as clear as I possibly can. Alaska is not the place to come to if you have minimal hiking or camping experience, unless you have a knowledgeable guide with you. Forget anything Christopher McCandless did. I was part of a SAR, search and rescue, effort to find a lost hiker. We didn't know much about him. That wasn't really our immediate duty. We just know he went hiking and didn't come back. We had found an abandoned cabin that we assumed could have been used by the missing hiker as shelter. One of the things that we took note of was the fact that there were childlike footprints in the snow. They surrounded the cabin, but there were footprints in front of the windows surrounding it that looked as if they were peering inside. This wasn't an area you would take children. I mean, you could in theory, but it would be unlikely. We were pretty deep in the bush at this point. Also, the footprints were fresh enough. This was the time of year when the snow was a bit slushy but still cold. Still easy to make out children's footprints. The hiker was found by another group of rangers. He had unfortunately met his end. He had hanged himself from a small tree. Alaska has some interesting folklore. This includes the Irsenrot people, who are well-known figures in the folklore of my area of Alaska. The legends about them vary, but generally they are seen as very territorial forest spirits. They encounter lost hikers and lure them further into the bush with noises and voices. They are said to take on the form of children. The legend says they hang victims from trees and mock them as they die. I don't want to spread any level of propaganda regarding spirits of the forest. This could very well just be a case of mental health. That's bad enough as it is. But from what I know and remember, the departed didn't seem to be battling anything. But, as someone who has struggled with mental health in my own life, I know that it's not that black and white. But it's one of those things that you can't help but wonder about. Could an otherworldly menace be at play in the vast wilderness of Alaska, where many people are missing and some mysteries remain unsolved? I'm personally a believer that we have our share of secrets in the bush. This wasn't the last encounter that I had with something strange. I think there are many creatures and entities roaming around here that we have no knowledge of. More importantly, please check in on your loved ones. Be there for people in your life. Some of us feel like we have it together but don't. Be a friend, reach out if you're concerned, and please do reach out if you're feeling alone. I feel like sometimes we forget that we're all in this together. There's no shame in needing help, and it's okay to not be okay. But there's no reason you can't have someone help you through it. Sending my thoughts and prayers out to everyone. God bless. Werewolf or something? This is some years back. We used to live at my mother-in-law's house, and she lived somewhat at the edge of town in the desert, SoCal. There was civilization beyond her neighborhood to the south, but it was more rural, like dirt roads, few streetlights, and eventually those neighborhoods terminated at a mountain/large hill. Beyond that, mostly wilderness. At the end of our street was a field where people would off-road and ride dirt bikes, and it overlooked the neighboring cities to the west. Really pretty and serene at night. I would often take some beers and drive down there, park, drink, listen to music, etc., because my so didn't like how much I was drinking at the time. So one night, I'm parked out there doing my thing, and in the darkness about 30 to 50 meters in front of my car, I see something moving through the darkness. I'm like, WTF is that? It was a fairly moonlit night. As it crossed more into the clearing, I was able to articulate what it looked like a little more, and it was some kind of creature kind of trotting at moderate speed that looked like a wolf of sorts, and I thought maybe it was a bear for a moment. But as I watched it, it took place in a matter of seconds. It looked more like a big dog or wolf than anything, but it seemed to look kind of off. It seemed bigger than any creature I had seen out there and had kind of a hunched over look to it and was just running/trotting, on all fours, determined to get wherever it was going. It didn't seem to notice or care that I was there. I was a fair distance away, and my lights were off. After it passed, I noped it TF out of there. I put my car in reverse and headed back home, tripping out on what I saw. This thing was big. I'd lived in the area my whole life and never saw anything like it. I've seen coyotes and other desert wildlife. There had been bears now and again that wandered from the mountains, but this didn't look like a bear. Someone at work the next day told me it might have been a skinwalker. Weird as hell. Has anyone seen anything like this? An encounter with something in the woods in Florida, any idea what it was? So, I know this is going to sound cheesy and fake, but last night, on Friday the 13th, me and my BF were spending time together, and I thought, oh, let's go out to the woods by your dorm and look for raccoons and possums and other critters, because we both love animals like that. We both agreed and went to grab dinner and then walked to the woods. It's about 10-ish, and we're about 2 miles in, and I see this deer jump right over the path and into the bushes, and I say, oh, look, it's a deer, and he looks for a good 5 minutes but doesn't see the deer, and I see it clear as day. But, after that, we continue, and we're about 4 to 5 miles deep into this trail when my BF says, I run this trail every single morning, and I honestly have no clue where we are, and that kind of spooked me because it's pitch black out and he has no clue where we are, so we see this path that takes a right, and we assume that it will loop around and take us back to the beginning so we can leave. I'm about 2 to 4 feet ahead of him, and I just freeze in place with my phone flashlight pointing in the brush, and he comes around the corner and sees me and says, what the duck is wrong? And I say, look, pointing my flashlight at the brush, and he's looking down, and I just say, look up, and he looks up, and all you see are these bright blue humanoid eyes about 9 feet up staring at me. It was really skinny but so tall, and you can slowly see it scanning from me to him. I make eye contact with it for maybe a minute until he grabs me and says, we need to go, and the second he says that, the thing moves towards us in this crooked movement. So we walk slowly. I'm walking backwards, he has me by the wrist while he walks forwards, and you can just see this thing stalk us until we take the left turn and retrace our steps back out of the woods. While we were walking/running, we were screaming prayers, and I don't know, it was terrifying, and when we left, my body just kept telling me to go back into the woods, and I couldn't stop tearing up while just staring at the woods when we got out of it. Also, while we were leaving, there was this loud shriek or howl. I know this is speculation, but he said the name Skinwalker or Wendigo, and I was also whistling at deer in the woods, I don't know, and we smelled this super strong odor, and it got dead quiet when we saw it, and the closer we got to leaving, the louder the wildlife got. Once, after setting up and getting into my bag, I heard footsteps around the tent. Leaves would rustle and stop, like a bipedal animal was circling my tent. Finally, I grew a pair and unzipped the tent and looked outside. It was a squirrel. I would scurry, stop, which to me sounded like footsteps in the leaves. But now, for a real one. I was hiking on the Laurel Highlands Trail. It was day 2, a nice, sunny afternoon, and I planned on something like 17 miles. After the trail leaves Highpitched SP, it crosses a road and goes down an embankment into state game lands. It's a wetter, almost bottomland type forest. Mature canopy with a fern layer and shrubby hammocks where trees have fallen. Well, as soon as I went down the embankment and looked up, I froze. I was completely overwhelmed by a horrible, inhuman fear. I looked around, scanning the area to see if there was a bear or person I somehow sensed, but there was nothing. Despite everything, I felt as though I was about to face complete annihilation. I felt like running but was too afraid to turn my back. So I planned how I would carefully back out of there, towards the road, then turn and walk quickly up the incline and walk downhill on the road to the nearest ranger station or somewhere safe. It was extremely hard to shake the feeling that I needed to leave as soon as possible. Finally, though, I managed to convince myself that I was being ridiculous and instead walked very quickly down the trail, looking around and behind me every once in a while. As soon as I'd gone 1/4 of a mile, or even less, the fear just suddenly and completely vanished. I have never been that afraid in my life, before or since. I have no idea what the hell happened. I didn't see anything unusual, and no other people at all. This isn't my story, it is my father's story instead. This had happened to them over 10 years ago when we used to live near the woods. Our house sat on a small property with woods behind it that seemed to go on for miles. My family was moving to a different house at the time, and the incident happened on the last day at that house, right after we moved into the new one. We had gotten 99% of our stuff from the old house, and my parents had to go back to grab the few things they had left there. As they got there, my mom had told my dad that she was going to go grab the last few things in the house while making sure she didn't forget anything else and was going to turn off all the lights when she was done. My dad, on the other hand, Was going to go to the garage. The garage was across the house and was a small building that could hold 2 cars, to make sure he got the rest of his tools and to lock it up. My dad made his way over to the garage, and my mom had entered the house. She went upstairs and was gathering the last of her stuff when she heard footsteps coming up the stairs. The footsteps stopped at the top of the stairs and didn't move after that. My mom had heard my dad's voice saying, "I don't think that's a good idea." My mom was confused and replied back to him, saying, "What's not a good idea?" She repeated the same question a few more times while calling out my dad's name and trying to get a response from him. She went to the stairs and saw nobody was there. She was confused but was also beginning to freak out. The front door opened and closed, and my mom heard footsteps approaching from the stairs. She looked at the stairs again and saw my dad coming up the stairs. She started asking my dad why he was ignoring her and what wasn't a good idea. My dad looked at my mom confused and asked her what she was talking about. My mom explained everything she experienced, from the heavy footsteps she heard to something that sounded exactly like my dad. My dad explained to her that he was outside the whole time and had just come in the house less than a minute ago after locking up the garage. My dad was a bit nervous, but my mom was definitely freaked out. My dad said he was finished and was ready to go, as my mom also told him the same thing. Not even a moment later, after my mom finished talking, the dining room light began to flicker very fast, the bathroom door slammed shut violently, and a very loud crash came from my parents' bedroom. Both of them went to go see what it was, and it was the ceiling fan that had fallen from the ceiling and onto the ground. The sliding closet door had then opened on its own, and my mom looked at my dad and told him that they needed to leave immediately. My parents grabbed the rest of their stuff, turned off the lights, and ran out of the house in record time. They locked the house up, threw their stuff in the car, and got the duck out of Dodge. Every time my mom retells this story, it still shakes her up to this day. In my opinion, I believe that the spirit that was imitating my dad's voice was likely a Wendigo, since we did live near a forest and were on Native American land at the time. Spirit in the woods. I live in the Canadian wilderness in a cabin on my parents' farm. I mostly use my quad bike to hunt and chase away wolves and other predators. But I also go out with my brother on this trail, which is really awesome. This one time it was a rainy evening, and my parents rang me to tell me that there were some wolves nearby and they wanted me to check it out, so I grabbed my gun and went to have a look. The woods were dark, and I was cold and wet, so I just wanted to get it over and done with. A howl sounded out from nearby, so I headed over to where I heard it. The lights from my quad bike illuminated the woods, but I couldn't see any wolves, so I parked and headed out with a flashlight and my gun. A pack of wolves was off in the near distance, so I fired a shot into the air that spooked them, and they fled into the darkness. I went back to my quad bike just wanting to get back to my nice wood fire. When I got back to my quad, I turned on the headlights and looked up. As I did, I saw clear as day a woman in a black dress walk behind a tree. I was startled, as I hadn't seen anyone when I went in. I ran after her, but as soon as she appeared, she had vanished. If anyone has any ideas, please tell me. Can somebody out there identify this, please? I had this encounter on July 17, 2024. I'm super experienced with extreme rugged camping. I avoid cold at all costs, not my cup of tea, but heat and ruggedness I adore. I ride out on a quad, usually to remote locations. Often cowboy camp. Literally just face down in the mud/dirt/sand, you name it, etc., occasionally. This year I ventured out. Found an off-grid site that had an old iron trash can as a fire pit and a picnic table. Middle of boony nowhere. About 10 minutes go by after I shut the quad off, and I begin hearing these odd screaming sounds with reverb off in the far southeast distance of my position, moving northeast. Didn't think much of it at all, firstly. Thought some fired up riders passing through or something is quite common. It being a Tuesday, though, I barely saw anybody out there the entire week until Friday. I do not scare easily at all. Finally noticed it getting closer and closer to me. That's when I started rolling film. It sounded like a male adult primally screaming in dying agony, some type of creature, and either an adult female screaming or a small child screaming, all at once with reverb. The way the sound was bouncing through the trees was downright bizarre. I have never heard an echo quite like this in my life. It all suddenly phased into sounding like it was surrounding me at this point, a few yards beyond the tree line. Imagine hearing screaming in a specific direction, and it suddenly clicks to sounding like it's all around you. It all suddenly halts. I then hear semi-unintelligible words screaming from the male with reverb in the northwest of my location. The female/little child screams back from the same location. More word screaming commenced as some other rider came up chasing after it for whatever reason. I halted the guy on the bike, and he said he had no idea what it was but was following it to try and see what it was. No clue how he even came across whatever this was. It began moving quickly off in the distance again, and the rider took off immediately thereafter. I had no idea what it was or why the man was even attempting to identify it. I have never heard anything like this in my entire life of camping/riding, and I have completed hundreds of excursions at this point. I was never spooked for some odd reason, either, through the entire experience. Looking back, I sure as shit should have had no doubt at all. But for some reason, I just listened and recorded. I have listened to the recording a million times, yet I still have no idea what it contains. At all. The state I was in is known for Wolfman and other cryptids, if one believes in folklore as such, I suppose. I have never seen any creatures in person, so I cannot personally say whether they exist or not. I don't dismiss anything, as it can't be totally ruled out. Life is mysterious in general. Whatever I heard that night, though, certainly has me convinced it was some type of cryptid. Or something almost otherworldly. Or just something unknown. Does anyone out there have any ideas at all what these could be? Because I'm clueless. Like I said, I don't scare easily at all. In the moment, I remember at one point I thought, should I scream back? Just to see WTH would happen. But common sense kept me from it since I had no clue what I was dealing with. I'm still on the fence, regretting my actions. Don't ever sleep near the woods. About a year and a half ago, I was on my way back from a small lakeside wedding. It was beautiful, but I left during the after-party since I had an early morning shift. The drive was roughly 2.5 hours through long stretches of rural backroads, the kind where your high beams catch every tree branch like it's reaching for your windshield. Creepy as hell. I had been on the road for a little over an hour when that sudden wave of exhaustion hit me. You know the kind, where your eyes won't stay open and your head keeps dropping even though the music's blasting and the window's down. Yeah, that one. I was fighting it hard, but there was nothing around for miles. No gas stations, no rest stops, just endless trees and shadows. So I did what I knew was a bad idea, but I couldn't help it. I pulled over onto a narrow patch of dirt off the side of the road, tucked slightly into the woods. I left the engine running just in case and leaned the seat back, making a mental note, 1:13 a.m. I must have knocked out hard, because the next thing I remember is waking up to tapping. Not knocking. Tapping. Light, deliberate, like someone drumming their nails on the passenger window. I jolted up, heart racing, and checked the clock. 1:47. I stared at the window for a good 30 seconds but didn't see anything. There was no movement, no shadows, nothing. I told myself it was probably a twig in the wind or a raccoon or something dumb. I was still groggy, so I stupidly let myself doze off again. The second time, I didn't hear the sound, I felt it. The car shifted. Just a little. Like someone had leaned on it. My eyes snapped open. It was 2:31. Now I was sweating. I sat up slowly and scanned all around. That's when I saw it, something dash past the front of my car. Human-shaped. Too fast to be an animal, too jerky to be normal. I reached for the ignition, but it was already running. I threw it into drive, spun onto the road, and just gunned it. Not even half a mile up the road, I passed another car, parked weirdly on the shoulder, driver's side door wide open. No lights, no movement. I slowed just a little, long enough to glance at the empty seat. No one. Then I saw movement in my rearview mirror. Something stepped out of the trees near that car. I couldn't make out its face, but I saw its hands, both of them dragging something. Nope. I floored it and didn't stop until I hit the first gas station 40 miles out. Parked under the lights, surrounded by people, I finally let myself breathe. Moral of the story? If your body's begging for sleep in the middle of nowhere, don't stop. Caffeinate yourself into a coma, but don't sleep near the woods. Something might be waiting for you to close your eyes. Giant invisible creature in the woods? I had this encounter about 15 years ago. I still have no idea what it was or what to make of it. I was a teenager at the time. A friend of mine came home from school with me, and it was a really nice spring day, so we decided to go meet with another friend in the neighborhood. Now, this was a very rural neighborhood in central Missouri, so we needed to walk a mile or two on an isolated gravel road to get to our friend's place. My parents weren't home yet, so we snuck a few beers in a backpack and went on our way. Like I said, it was a wonderful day. The birds were chirping, the whole neighborhood was peaceful and quiet. We had no reason to feel like anything was out of the ordinary. We came to a fork in the road. The woods cleared a bit, and there was a dense, bushy area to our right. We both heard something coming from this area, so we stopped to listen. From a distance, we could see and hear the bushes shaking and rattling back and forth. We decided to walk closer to get a better look. As we approached the bushes, the shaking grew more and more intense. Suddenly, a cat darted out from the bushes in front of us. It was running extremely fast, like it was being chased by something and running for its life. This is the part that I can't explain. Immediately following the cat, we saw the bushes shake violently one last time. Then, we heard what sounded like something huge stomping on the ground, running after the cat. We saw a cloud of dust being kicked up on the gravel road in a straight line all the way to the other side of the woods. This thing was so loud that it shook the ground. Its footsteps made a trampling sound, like it was on 4 legs and as big as an elephant. We were both completely stunned. The creepiest part about the creature is that we didn't see anything other than the bushes rattling and the dust from the gravel. Whatever this was, it seemed to be completely invisible. Obviously, the sight scared the shit out of us. We just kind of stood there in silence for a minute, dumbfounded by what we just saw. We tried to come up with some kind of rational explanation, but we just couldn't. We debated turning back, but we were already about halfway there. Since this thing didn't seem to notice us whatsoever, we felt a little relieved. We took off running to our friend's house. I've tried to look into this incident over the years to see if anyone has had a similar experience. So far, I haven't come across anything that matches with what we experienced. I'm really curious to see if anyone else has seen or even heard of anything similar. Does anyone know what this experience might have been? The forest that was never there before. So, this happened back in 2006 or 2007. My family and I went to a park where we had been going for probably 20 years. It's quite a big one too, but still, one day, we came across a part of it where the meadows usually continued, yet, all of a sudden, a part of the forest was there. We were at first wondering what happened, then shrugged it off and went down, going towards it, then went inside of it. It was pretty dark in there for being an afternoon in autumn and kind of weird. Then there was almost no wind, it was silent. There was a part where the light came through, a bit dim, yet kind of open. I looked around, and the ground was black, the soil, and it was all just so surreal. Between most of the tree roots were old crimson red bricks. They all looked pretty weathered. The forest was, at least from the looks, 100 years old, if not older. Well, and now we come to the rather more uncanny part. We were standing around, looking around, wondering why we never saw this forest, which wasn't too big either. Then it got strange, pretty dim, almost no wind, and stuffy. It was like something was in the air, giving all of us goosebumps, and I heard a voice, which told me to leave. To get out, now. I told them, and we went out of there as soon as possible. The next time we came by this place was probably a month later. The power lines, before the start, next to the road, were still there, but the forest, it was gone, like it was never there in the first place. The grass looked like the rest of the meadows. Like, it truly was never there in the first place. To this day, my family and I wonder what happened on this day. I had paranormal encounters before, yet smaller ones, but later, like 2009-2010, and more recent too. But never something like a piece of a forest popping up out of nowhere and then vanishing, like it was never there in the first place. I wonder if someone else witnessed something similar. Strange, unsettling experience in southern Utah. This happened to me a few years ago, but it's definitely stayed with me since. I do a lot of solo camping on road trips to visit family in Utah, and I've camped many times at a state park outside St. George called Snow Canyon. I've always felt pretty safe there, although I've gotten some creepy vibes late at night there a few times. Anyway, this particular time I had a late start from Los Angeles, so I was arriving very late to the campground. I was driving down a very dark, long, desolate kind of road before you enter the park and felt a little unsettled. I was anxious about arriving so late but also just had a weird sense of being a bit scared, like I shouldn't be there. Suddenly a huge dump of water hit my windshield out of nowhere and almost gave me a heart attack. It totally drenched it, like a bucket of water was poured over it. There was zero rain, it was a hot, dry night in the desert. There were no trees or anything at all above me as I drove, so where could this have come from? I had to use my windshield wipers to clear it off, and later when I got out of my car, it was just the front area that was all wet. I had a bad feeling the rest of the night, unlike the other times I have stayed there, sitting up late on my own to look at the stars. I tried to do the same but felt like I was being watched or something. It could have just been my nerves at that point. And that's it. Nothing else weird happened. I know this isn't the most exciting story, but it always makes me wonder what happened. It was oddly disturbing and confusing. If anyone has any ideas about what could have happened, I'm all ears. I had a strange encounter in the woods of Montana. Hi, I'd like to start this out by saying that I am generally pretty skeptical about cryptids and the like, but I've recently had some experiences that I can't seem to explain. I've been an avid outdoorsman my entire life and spent countless hours in and around the woods, and this just has me stumped. This all took place in the mountains of western Montana over a 2-week time span. I was out having a campfire in a relatively secluded location with one of my friends when we noticed a random light from off in the woods. At the time, I didn't think much of the light, but we noticed it moving around a bit, so we attributed it to a late-night hiker with a headlamp. However, given our location and the late hour, we didn't feel comfortable staying there, so we decided to leave. A couple of days later, I returned to the same spot alone and initially didn't see any lights, but after about an hour, they appeared again in roughly the same direction. However, this time there were 3 lights. The strange aspect was that all the lights moved in sync, bobbing up and down while getting closer and farther away simultaneously. I decided to walk towards them to see if it might just be a sign reflecting light that I hadn't noticed, but as I approached, they seemed to be getting further away, maintaining roughly 300 yards of distance between me and them, so I turned around and left the area. A few days after that I returned to the same place, this time at around 2:30 a.m., but I couldn't shake this feeling of paranoia that had overcome me, seemingly from the minute I showed up. At about 3:45, I heard a single noise that resembled a whistle, just one note, nothing unusual, but it seemed to come from far off and deep in the woods, so I dismissed it as merely a bird or some other small critter. But, about 20 minutes later, I heard more whistling, this time a genuine tune that lasted about 15 seconds and sounded no more than 50 yards away. I exclaimed, "Duck that," and quickly ran to my car before leaving. I haven't been back since. This is the scariest thing that's happened to me in the woods, but I might just be paranoid since a camper was killed nearby not long ago. What do you all think? Is there anything in the area that could explain these encounters? Anything helps. I saw a skinwalker. These are 2 separate stories of my encounters with skinwalkers in Utah. I live near a mountain in a valley close to Nevada. We have lots of deer and mountain lions, and wildlife comes down from the mountains all the time. I was in the car with my best friend, driving down the road, when we saw a very, very elderly dog, trying to relieve himself by a tree, with a very gray snout, droopy eyes and ears, and he was hobbling around very slowly. I asked my friend to stop the car so we could hopefully get a hold of his owners, as he should not be out in the street if he cannot get out of the way of cars. I got out of the car and approached him. He tucked his tail and woofed at me and turned away and began hobbling away towards the road. I get back to my friend's car to look for a cracker or something to eat to lure the dog to me so we could take care of him. I get back in the car and tell my friend to follow the dog. We drive quite literally 10 feet forward, and my eyes never leave the dog once. I saw him turn towards the street and pass between 2 cars parked in front of a house, and I urged my friend to stop the car in fear of us hitting him. I get out of the car and go right to where he was, gone. Literally the entire street was empty. He had completely disappeared. There was no way he could have run, as he was too elderly and slow for us not to see him run away. My friend and I looked for him for a solid 10 minutes, calling out to him and offering snacks from the car, trying to find him, but we never saw him again. This happened in broad daylight, by the way, with nobody outside with us. My second encounter was when I was walking alone in the same area at night with my best friend again. We both saw and heard a dog barking at us from a few streets up, coming from the direction of the mountains. We had to go where the dog was to get to my friend's house, so we approached, trying to be soft and gentle, talking to the dog, asking it to be nice and to go home. It turned away from us and turned behind a car, and within the same second, a man came out from behind the same car the dog had gone behind, and the dog disappeared. The man kept walking away from us and ignored us completely. We were so freaked out that we couldn't even speak to each other about it for a while. Then we checked with each other and asked what we both saw. It was the same. I know that these creatures could be anywhere, but the fact that I live in Utah, have seen them multiple times, and hear things at night all the time, I would not be surprised in the slightest. All I know is that what I saw was real, and I had a witness with me both times. We both saw the same thing at the same time, and my friend is a skeptic. She does not believe in any of this paranormal stuff, so for her to tell me she believes me and saw the same thing really makes me question how often we are coming in contact with these creatures. Bizarre experience in the woods early this morning at 1:45 a.m. We live out in the middle of nowhere in Tennessee, surrounded by woods, hills, and not a neighbor to be seen for miles. Last night we lost all water pressure in our home, So we reported it to the water company and went outside to take the car to the entrance of our property to trace the water line to see if we had a leak or a burst pipe. As we stepped outside, we heard loud wood knocks, which we hear occasionally and often jokingly attribute to a squatch, with the understanding it could be anything. As we got to the car, we heard bizarre radio signal sounds coming from the hills, like an AM radio changing stations, a mixture of music, talking, and noise. It stopped briefly and then started up again. My wife said, "Hello?" And it stopped again. We stood there spooked and thought we may have an unlikely trespasser, so I went back inside and grabbed my pistol. We still needed to inspect the water line. We drove to the front of the property looking for leaks and stopped the car to listen for any running water or activity. The coyotes started going nuts, but this is typical. Other than that, silence. We cranked the car, turned around, and my car immediately died as I was driving. Prosaic explanations that came to mind were radio signals bouncing off the ionosphere and interacting with the foliage, or maybe something to do with solar activity. Either way, it was fun and something that I thought would be fun to share on here. Don't go into the forest at night. I never believed in the paranormal until today. My best friend is a practicing witch. He reads tarot, collects crystals, and tells the most horrific stories. I never believe them, although sometimes they do make me pee my pants a bit. Anyways, he asked me to go to the nearby town to look for animal bones, and I agreed to go because I collect bones. The town is about 3 miles away from my house, but it has a population of only about 200 people. There are fields and sparse forests, but very few homes. I put my car into park and grabbed my keys and phone. I always park in the same place when I come here. I know the land like the back of my hand, so I'm not scared of getting lost up here. We stepped out of the car and started walking up the dirt trail. We turned off of it and into the forest, about 10 feet into the forest, examining the land for any animal remains or bones. There was nothing. Jake turned to me and told me that we should leave before dark hit, because he never goes into the woods at night. I agreed and kept walking. We must have walked for about an hour and a half, examining the ground every step. Nothing. No animal bones, droppings, or even animal sounds. When I come out here, I usually see jackrabbits and little field mice, and I typically find at least one bone. The sun was slowly dropping behind the mountain, and we decided to turn back towards the car. I started leading us back to the car, weaving through the sparse trees. The night was beautiful, but it was very quiet. I felt my stomach turn. We walked for about 20 minutes before I realized that we were lost. I turned on my phone flashlight because I kept tripping over short bushes and trees. We walked pretty far, but not nearly enough to go as far as I had gone before. I kept walking, while Jake started freaking out behind me. He had turned on his flashlight and went on and on about how many things could kill you in the forest after dark. I saw a weird figure in the distance, and I figured it must be a shack. My curiosity overcame me, and I began to walk towards it. As we approached, I saw branches jutting out in every direction. When we reached the figure, we realized it was a mutilated tree. The trunk appeared to have fractured into approximately 10 distinct pieces. I said that it must have been lightning, but Jake pointed out that there would be burn marks. There were no burn marks anywhere. It even seemed to still be alive. It just looked like a dinosaur had stepped on it. We took a couple of pictures and turned in the opposite direction. It was pitch black by now. I stepped on something squishy and shined my flashlight down. Under my combat boot lay a freshly killed rat, the first sign of animal life we had seen that evening. Jake started freaking out even more, and we started speed walking out of the forest. He even held my hand, and I don't blame him. The final straw came when we heard a mix between a roar and a scream. Now I've heard many animal sounds in my life, mountain lion, cougar, you name it. But this sound was unnatural. We kept going. Jake stopped for a second, and I turned to face him. I asked why he stopped. He nervously told me that the flashlight on his phone wouldn't turn on. The rest of the features worked fine, but the flashlight just wouldn't turn on. He put away his phone, and we kept walking. We kept seeing shadows run past out of the corner of our eyes, footsteps crunching behind us, and I swore I heard something say my name. That's where I started freaking out. We finally made it out onto a road, and we were about a quarter mile past the car. We had walked all the way past the car. We walked back and quickly got in and locked the doors. I sped out of the forest. As soon as we were in the forest, Jake's flashlight started working again. When I got home, I shared pictures of the tree and the same story I'm telling you now on a social page dedicated to Utah paranormal activity. I got over 100 responses. Everyone agreed that the tree was unnatural, but that wasn't surprising. What was surprising was the stories of other people who had been there. Several people reported cult activity, and one individual mentioned that a serial killer had been present there about 30 years ago. He ended a bunch of people, and not all the bodies had been found. Buried the bodies in the forest. And of course, many people referenced the many inhuman things that had been encountered in our area, including not deer and skinwalkers. I was horrified. I don't really know what was stalking us through the forest that night. I hope it was just a cult, because I can't imagine what else could have been after us that night. Needless to say, I won't be going back to that town after dark, or at all for that matter. So the next time you go into the forest, don't get caught after dark. Something might follow you home. What did I and my friend experience in the woods? Okay, I don't care at all if anyone doesn't believe this. Me and my friend are in Ireland. We snuck out of my house at, I'd say around 1:40. I know we got to the woods at 47 past. We thought it would be, a chill spot to hang out. Yeah, it was creepy, but, in an exciting way, so we go to a campfire, which we didn't decide to use because we didn't have anything to start it, and it's really wet out RN. My friend goes to piss, and TBH, I don't even fully remember everything I heard. I know I messaged my friend oh, we are here in these woods, and I'm low-key tweaking because I keep thinking I'm hearing twigs snapping, but I reckon it's just raindrops from the trees. But when my friend hit back, I asked him to stop ducking with me. Even though this happened around an hour ago, maybe an hour and a half ago, I'm still I was pretty anxious, so I don't remember certain parts fully. My friend has messed with me when we explore places when it's dark outside. When I looked away from my friend, I heard something like deep breathing. I don't know how to explain it, but even though I thought it was him, it sounded even though it was coming from what sounded like right next to me where he was, it sounded disconnected. I was fully convinced he was messing with me. I heard a voice that, to be honest, sounded like some noise from a vape. A super loud one but like a vape, and I'm okay, I know it's you because he has a vape. He says his vape is not, able to do that, and he is right, it's a super small vape. Then I look away, and he's talking, and I hear it again while he's talking, so I tell him, oh, we need to go now. He is okay, we can leave, because at that point, I'm in detail telling him I'm kind of freaked out. When leaving, we hear a sound I can't really explain at all. It's animalistic but not a sound of any animal I've heard, and he says, oh shit, I heard that too, and we started booking it out. We kind of hear it when running. That's basically it. WTF was this? Large shadow goat. So this was back in 2017, late summer, when it gets dark around 8 p.m. Me and my class were camping in the woods for some reason I don't remember, but we were all getting ready to go to sleep and end the day. I was the last person to go through the woods to the toilets, so I ended up going on my own down the dark path, where you can very easily get lost. As I was approaching the path through the woods, I looked up over the tree line since I heard a sharp sound, and I saw a shadowy figure that looked almost goat-like. It had pointed horns that were completely straight, larger than the trees, and could change size. My only reason to believe it was able to change size is because after freaking out at the first sight of it, I tried throwing a rock at it when all of a sudden it shrunk and disappeared through the tree line. I ran back to the campsite where the teachers were, and I told them about it, and of course they didn't believe me, but I know what I saw, and I'm not someone to fake things in my mind or lie about things that can hurt someone. I told them all it's dangerous and not to go back in even during the day. I stayed clear of that path while the others did not. During the last 3 days of being there, all the children my age all came back with some type of injury that they couldn't feel/didn't know about. If anyone can give some info as to what it may be, I would greatly appreciate it. The one thing I can think of that somewhat resembles it is Krampus, but it wasn't. I think. I encountered this in 2017 in the United Kingdom in an area called Suffolk, and I've lived from then on as if something is always behind me with bad intentions, but I've never seen whatever I feel, and I still warn people to this day that they shouldn't go towards forest paths. The hunting trip gave me the creeps. My pops needed a partner to go on a bow hunt with since his hunting buddy got a tag somewhere else. He's been hunting for the better part of 40 years. So I couldn't let him go alone, and we packed up to hunt in the Tawyabe National Forest near Kingston, Nevada, in the Arc Dome Wilderness area. This particular spot we decided to scout was located north of Kingston and called Weeks Canyon. It's mostly rugged high Sierra desert. But this spot has a creek running from way up high, and we figured the deer would come to drink. They would go there naturally. So we set up camp at the entrance to the canyon, and there are bugs, birds, bees, and all sorts of wildlife just bustling about. Lots of dense green brush all over, and some big junipers sprouted all over. So we camouflaged ourselves and headed up the canyon to see if we could find any sign. About 1.5 miles in, my dad stops and is dead silent. He whispers to me, "Do you hear anything?" I pause, holding my breath, and listen. Nothing. So I tell him that. "Nah, Dad, I got nothing." He responds and says, "Exactly. There are no birds. No squirrels, no chipmunks, son, there's not even insects here." Then it hits me, the place is living but dead. The wild berries that the plants grew were fully ripened, most so ripe they fell off and rotted. The trails were untouched, with no tracks of any kind. Only our boot prints leading to that point. We figure it's just an anomaly or pressure from other hunters. We pressed on for about another half of a mile, turned around, and saw nothing at all. That afternoon at camp, we were finishing up dinner. And then over 100 birds flew in from the valley below and landed in the bush near our camp. Not one went into the canyon. After discussing this and some general uneasiness, we went to bed. And I was plagued by the oddest dreams. None that I can recollect. But I awoke at 4-ish as we were headed out to do some morning scouting. My dad stepped out to pee, and then when he came back, I did the same. I cannot explain to you the feeling I had, but I'll try. There were eyes on me, and they weren't small. I could feel them all over. But only from one source. I was whipping my head back and forth, and my mind was in such fight or flight mode I forgot that I was even using the bathroom. I hastily went back into the tent. Sat down without saying a word. And my dad said, "You feel it too, huh?" I told him, "Yeah, something's out there." And my dad interrupted, saying, "It's not normal." And to hear that come out of my dad's mouth really got under my skin. All his years hunting and mining in remote places of NV, and he's never been spooked. We stayed in the tent until some more natural light came out of the sky. Hopped in the car and scouted elsewhere that morning. I keep racking my brain about it, and I was thinking, maybe it's just a mountain lion. But I've been in some difficult situations before. I used to work in a prison and did a tour overseas. And I've had the feeling of being stalked, but this one shot straight into my soul. I just can't shake the unnaturalness of it all, water but no wildlife. Birds leaving the water source to reside in a desert flat. Mostly the feeling of whatever that thing was that came to observe us. Maybe I'm just hyping it up since I am mostly a city boy. Let me tell you what I saw in the Appalachian Mountains. Originally, I'm from West Virginia. As a child, I moved around between the Appalachian region and the Midwest. Between the ages of 10 and 13, I lived in rural Kentucky in the foothills of one of the oldest mountain ranges on the planet. I lived with my dad and my grams. We lived in what we call a holler. Think of it like a cul-de-sac in between a set of foothills. We lived in the middle of the neighborhood with nothing but family on both sides. No one lived across from us or behind us because of the foothills. When I moved in, my grams had some rules I had to follow. At the time, I chalked them up to hillbilly stranger danger. There were things like don't mess around with the wild animals, don't go out into the woods alone, and then they got a little weird, don't whistle, if you hear your name, don't answer and don't go to it, and if you see someone in the woods you might know, no, you didn't, and just come home. This experience happened in August when I was 11. My dad and I had a mowed path through the tall grass and berry bushes to the left of the double wide we lived in. We camped out there a lot because it was close enough that we could check on my grams. Now, when you're in the woods, things are louder than you think. You can hear animal life, bugs chattering, and the wind rustling through the trees and grass. There was a stream that ran along the road you could easily hear. That night we added the campfire to that list. My dad decided to go back up to the house, about a quarter mile away, to get more beer and to check on grams. Before he left, he told me not to mess with the fire. After a few minutes of watching the fire, things started to get quiet. Like, real quiet. The wind had all but stopped, bug and animal sounds were all gone, and the stream sounded like it was miles away. I was getting uncomfortable even though I've been left at the campground before like this. Then I started to smell and taste it. It was in the back of my throat out of nowhere. This awful metal tang. After a few more moments of dread, my dad came back. He was mad right away, said he could smell burning metal coming up the trail. He accused me of tossing beer cans in the fire. I told him I didn't and even pointed to the fire to prove it. He said there was a storm coming in and we needed to get back home, and he let it go. We exited the tent and began our journey back home. Now the very cool but very weird thing about lightning in woods this dense is when the lightning hits, it lights up everything like the middle of the day, well, up to the front of the trees. After the first set of trees, it's pitch black. There are no streetlights, and unless you have lights on your property, it's completely black. So it's pitch black, lightly raining, and other than the dim lights from the house windows, there's nothing. I'm eating watermelon as one dose in August in the mountains when the first clap of lightning hits. Everything is as bright as it can be. After the second pass, it's black as pitch aging. The next clap of lightning comes, and that's when I kind of see it. On the porch, past the yard, over the stream, past the road and the ditches on either side, just past the first line of trees, I could see the silhouette of it. Then it goes dark. This is also when I can't start to taste that same awful burning metal. I'm not really sure what I saw, so I just kind of stay still. It's a few moments before the lightning hits aging. The figure is now closer, standing side by side to the trees. Then it's back to aging. I'm standing now. I'm at a loss for what to do. It's been 20 years to this day, and I've tried but could never fully describe what I saw. This thing's head wasn't proportioned to its body. The arms were too long, and the torso didn't fit right. It was like asking a blind person to draw what they looked like. It just didn't look correct. Once the lightning hit the aging thing, it was standing in the middle of the road. Not wanting to see this thing get any closer, I go inside. My Grams is doing dishes and asks why I'm inside. I tell her I think I saw something. She almost immediately gets my dad on his feet, telling him to shut and lock all the windows and doors. My dad, vaguely drunk, obeys. That night I sleep with her. The following day, we find the tent door torn off. The damage didn't resemble that of an animal. Instead, it appeared as though someone had taken and ripped apart the items. My uncle, who lived a mile or so up, had all 8 chickens killed. Heads gone, no blood. For the next few weeks, all the kids had to wait for the bus with an adult. My dad had to be late for work for almost 3 weeks. Anytime I tried to talk about it, I just had the subject change. I just figured I was a kid and it wasn't important or real. It wasn't until years later I finally understood. I was in my early 20s, and some cousins were in town for Halloween. As I was telling this story, my aunt got irate with me, saying, "Don't you tell them that, don't you put that evil on them." After I couldn't help but think back on all the times I tried to talk about it and how I was shunned. My kid mind not realizing it wasn't as simple as a subject change, but then actively shushing me. Once I started dipping my toes in here, I realized there was a name for this ducking thing, the same name my aunt had called it that day at the party, and other people have seen it. The Goat Man. What bothers me the most is how to this day I couldn't describe any feature, nor have I ever tasted that awful burning metal taste. So friends, if you ever find yourself in the foothills of Kentucky, please remember my Grams rules. Goat? Could it be a more peculiar creature? Chaco Canyon is an old native settlement in New Mexico. For a long time it had been one of the larger societal hubs for the early native peoples of the area. Currently, the land is under protection and serves as a partial tourist attraction. It's truly beautiful. You can still explore old buildings that were built to house the massive society that had formed on the canyon floor. The natives smudge the area multiple times a year because of how active the spirits are. You can see bags hung all over the buildings by the native people in hopes of keeping things calm. I stayed overnight at their campsite, which resides at the base of Pueblo Alto. The hike to the top of the canyon offers breathtaking views of the surrounding wilderness. The wilderness stretches for miles, punctuated solely by ancient ruins. The night started beautifully. My friend and I had just descended Pueblo Alto and were making our way back to our campsite around dusk. A park ranger stopped us as we were leaving and instructed us to return quickly to the campsite. We'd stayed too late. We started our fire and had a couple of beers as the landscape dimmed, our few fellow campers' fires became more prominent, and the stars rose to their full isolated desert glory. They were and are truly remarkable. If you're ever out in New Mexico, Chaco Canyon stars are pristine. I'll leave you with the point of my story and the most unsettling thing that's ever happened to me. We'd talked and watched the stars for hours. We were constantly aware of the arrival and departure of other campers from our campsite. It was near the only bathroom in the area. Between 1 and 2 a.m., we'd had the temporary thrill you get by staring into the cosmos for an extended length of time and started gearing down for bed when every hair on my body stood on end. It was the immediate, noiseless dread of knowing something was imminently wrong. Just on the edge of our campfire, immediately at the edge of the darkness, I'd heard what distinctly sounded like a goat, baa. Looking over at my friend, I could immediately tell he'd heard the same noise. He stood completely straight, staring directly into the blackness that had produced the noise that was so acutely, entirely wrong. The thing is, it sounded like whatever was there was trying its absolute best to sound like a goat. Or maybe even trying to sound like a human who was trying to sound like a goat. It felt like a deliberate attempt to deceive us. It made me sick. It still makes me sick. Throughout the entire night, we heard every other camper approaching our campsite. Gravel litters the ground, announcing a person's presence well before their intended arrival. There's a reason the natives cleanse that place multiple times a year. And I think it's a good reason for me to leave that place well in my memories. Hiker from Sweden here. Before I begin, let me make one thing clear: everything I'm about to tell you is true. I haven't exaggerated a single detail. This is exactly how it happened. Believe me or don't, I lived it. It was a Wednesday in early July, 2018. The summer had been unusually warm, and I decided to take advantage of the weather by going on a hike between Alby Friluftsgard and Testaby. A modest distance, about 20 kilometers, with a small lean-to shelter about 4 kilometers before the village. That shelter was my destination for the night. I had packed the day before and set out around noon. In hindsight, starting in 30-degree heat wasn't my brightest idea, but I welcomed the challenge. The hike started off well, aside from walking 2 kilometers in the wrong direction. Eventually I found the right trail, and by 4 p.m. I took a break, estimating I had about 2 hours left to go. I was right. At 5:50 p.m., I arrived at the shelter. The place was peaceful, the kind of stillness you only find in nature, with the lake beside it shimmering in the evening light. Everything felt calm. Ordinary. Except for one thing. There was a man already at the shelter. It wasn't particularly unusual, this was a public shelter, after all. But when I greeted him, he didn't respond. He didn't even cast a glance my way. Just sat there, staring at nothing. Okay. Maybe just an antisocial guy lost in his thoughts, I reasoned. I didn't press it. I dropped my pack, made up my sleeping area, and then walked a few hundred meters to fetch some firewood. When I returned, the man hadn't moved an inch. Still seated. Still silent. I built a fire, made dinner, and tried not to think too much about him. It was around 8 p.m. now, and I noticed something else: he had no gear. No backpack. No food. There was also no sleeping bag included. Nothing. I naively assumed he'd arrived by car and would be heading home soon. But time passed. 9. 10. 11. He remained completely still. I started to feel uneasy. I put the last wood on the fire and crawled into my sleeping bag, hoping to sleep. Just minutes after I closed my eyes, I heard movement. My heart raced. I instinctively reached for the knife I kept near my pillow. But the man wasn't approaching me, he was walking away, into the woods. Relieved, I let my grip relax and drifted off, the knife still in hand. Then, around 3 a.m., I heard footsteps. They were coming back. It was him. This time, he wasn't empty-handed. He was holding something. And that something was an axe. I froze. I had always heard that in moments of true fear, your body can lock up, paralyzed by shock. Now I understood. I couldn't move. Could barely breathe. It felt like I'd been dropped into a scene from The Shining. I lay perfectly still, praying he didn't know I was awake. But he didn't just stand there. He approached. He came right up to me. Then he lay down. Right next to me, so close I could feel his breath on my skin. Like he wanted me to know he was there. Like he was mocking me. And I swear to God, I saw him smile. No sleeping bag. No mat. No pack. Just him. And that cursed axe. I didn't sleep another second that night. I couldn't. I wouldn't dare. Morning came. At 7 a.m., he stirred. Got up. Axe still in hand. And then, as casually as if he were going for a morning stroll, he walked off into the forest. Just like that. Gone. I stayed frozen in place for hours, too afraid to move until other hikers arrived. Only when I felt the safety of others nearby did I dare to breathe, pack up my things, and leave. I caught the first bus home. And I've never gone back. I had an unusual experience this past weekend. We were camping on the southeast side of Reddish Knob, George Washington National Forest, Virginia. It's only an hour or so away from Dolly Sods. It was around 3 a.m. when I fell asleep soundly. Then I heard a man scream, "Help me." I immediately sat up and listened for another scream or some sound, and there was nothing. My tent had the rainfly on, and I couldn't see out, so after a few minutes, I got out of the tent and walked about 20 feet and shined my bright flashlight all around. It was quiet, and there was no movement. All I could hear were the typical sounds of the woods at night. I camp a lot, and I stopped being concerned about different sounds in the woods as I've heard almost every type of animal, and it just doesn't bother me. The sound of a man screaming like he was being murdered was like my worst nightmare come to life. I know the old saying for Appalachia, if you thought you heard something, no you didn't, and when I thought I should yell out to see if there would be a response, I decided it would be better to be quiet. My girlfriend and I both woke up at the same time and looked in the same direction. She didn't hear the help me, but she couldn't describe what the sound was exactly. The strange thing was that even before I opened my eyes, I knew exactly where the sound came from. The sound didn't originate from a general direction, but rather from a precise location approximately 50 yards distant. I camped in the same site 3 years ago myself. It was rainy, and there was a slight fog in the air. I arrived at the area late and had to search for a campsite in the dark, eventually discovering this one. Normally I would walk around and see what's around, but it was late and raining off and on. I decided to forego setting up the tent and sleep in the car. I built a small fire and sat by it for about an hour, during which I kept feeling as if someone was watching me. I turned around, but nothing was there, and it was probably just in my head. I went to the car and went to sleep, but I woke up every 30 minutes or so with the same feeling, like something was watching me. I had the windows up, and I couldn't shine a light outside without putting them down or opening the car door because of the reflection off the glass. I ended up putting a lantern on the roof of my car to shed some light around me. Nothing happened. I didn't sleep at all, so I packed up early and left. When we pulled into the site this weekend, I recognized it immediately. It isn't a terrible campsite overall. It's set back from the road a ways and sits along a stream. I didn't have that weird feeling and thought it would be a good place to camp for the weekend. The camping experience was enjoyable until we heard a scream late at night. We ended up moving the next day to a campsite up on the ridge where we had stayed before. It was occupied when we first got there, and the people camping had left in the morning. There is a way to explain both experiences. The first time I camped there, I was alone, and it was late, so it could have been that I was more sensitive to the surroundings. What we heard this weekend could have been an animal, but I can't say what kind. To me, it sounded like a man screaming. There is usually an explanation for strange experiences. I know one thing. I'm not camping in that site again. The Appalachians are wonderful, but they are different from any other region in the US. It's hard to explain, but they just feel different. It feels like it has secrets from long ago that reveal themselves every now and again. Despite the strange stuff, I'm looking forward to going back. I am an owner/operator who works as a traveling industrial electrician. I also feel relevant to the story. I should mention I am a woman. My job takes me everywhere, so being somewhere in the middle of nowhere with strange sounds and critters kind of comes with the territory. So do poor bathroom accommodations. So a couple of weeks ago we jumped on a quick turnaround, 4 weeks, at something new to me, a plant that breaks down and processes utility-grade meats. This is the stuff that goes into dog food and potted meat, all that wonderful stuff. The site is in the uppermost corner of NW, Arkansas, north of Fayetteville. While I do the electrical work on one of 4 new process lines, it stinks so bad in this place. Now this is a large addition, basically a new wing of the building. They do not have a sufficient number of port-outlets, and the one they do have they claim hasn't been cleaned in a while because the crane is in the way, and despite the fact the site has the equipment to move the toilets so they won't be blocked, that doesn't mean they are doing it. So I make a deal with the boss that I will be using the bathroom, for number 2, at the country store about 7 miles from the site. I noticed the chemical building was set a good distance behind the plant, very typical placement. Behind it, they had a slab with a condenser, then a patch of grass on a downslope that led to a 4 chain-link fence. I could walk around and access a patch of woods with about 4 to 5 of gentle slope before a steep drop-off of about 40, and about 20 after the flat ground. There was a lovely creek. Perfect place to pee. So for the first week I was in a walk-in ceiling above the boiler room and peed in a bottle mostly. I did go to the woods patch a couple of times to pee, but everything was normal. The first time it got strange was in the second week. I crossed the fence to pee on the gentle slope patch before the drop-off, and something just came over me not to let my ass face the drop-off. I don't know, it was weird, like the sensation of being watched. I stood there and scoped it out to see if maybe another plant worker was there to take a leak, but there was not. Odd, whatever, back to work. I came out later that day to pee and still felt I wasn't alone. The feeling of being watched continued, and I just kind of did my business, faced my ass away from the woods, and went back to work. Until sometime in the third week, it was early in the morning. I was peeing in my spot in the woods, and suddenly something let loose. It was the unmistakable sound of a large, heavy body falling down the incline. I heard the leaves crunching, the tumbling sound rolling down the hill. I jumped up in midstream, scrambling to pull my Carhartts up. I spun around in the direction of the noise to see what it was. It took me a second of scanning, and the only thing I could see that didn't look normal was a black lump at the bottom of the incline near a large rock. I stood for a moment observing, thinking it was possibly a bear, but this thing was perfectly still, and no matter how long I looked at it, I couldn't make out a discernible shape. It also didn't move, and I was convinced whatever it wasn't breathing because of how still it was. I shrugged it off and went back to work. I spent the next couple of days walking the distance to the field I parked my truck to pee at. I just was not in the mood to go back to those woods. Eventually I broke down and went back to pee in the woods. I ignored the feeling of being watched, faced the woods down the slope the entire time, and pushed myself to leave. I repeated this for a couple of days until one evening late in the day I went to pee, but this time, as soon as I rounded the corner of the chemical building, this wave just washed over me. It was like when I rounded that corner, every instinctual alarm was telling me, get the F out of here right now. Of course, as a stupid human, I ignored this instinctual warning and still went to pee. For some reason I refused to face the downslope this time. There was like a voice in my head assuring me, don't look back. Thankfully I finished peeing with no incident, and then my phone rings, which legit startled the shit out of me. It was my husband looking for me. We work together. I tell him to hang on because I hear the noise of something splashing loudly in the creek. I turn around, and to this day I still cannot explain what I saw. It just doesn't remotely resemble anything of this world. I am going to do my best to describe it. Okay, you know those Muppets on Sesame Street whose appendages would stretch out and come back in? Imagine one of those but all black, Vanta black, but very fuzzy looking, just like the Muppets on Sesame Street. It ran in a bipedal fashion, but its legs would slink out and get long as it stepped. Imagine something black and fuzzy with two flailing fuzzy slinkies for legs running with matching arms flailing in a similar manner. In its locomotion, its skinny, fuzzy body and neck kind of expanded and wobbled up and down. It was just running west and cut across the creek, and without breaking stride, it ran up on the bank. I was kind of in awe for a moment, my mind couldn't process what it was seeing. Finally I frantically muttered to my husband, it's wrong, something is really wrong. I need you. Dropped my phone where I was standing, and ran back into the unit. I ended up running into my husband when I got up the stairs from the boiler room. I must have looked pretty bad because he grabbed me, shaking me a little, demanding to know what was wrong. I couldn't explain what I saw, I just said the black thing in the woods. My husband insisted I show him, so I took him around back of the chemical building to show him. The atmosphere wasn't the same, it was much lighter, nothing like before. My husband looked around, saw my phone on the ground, went and got it, and looked down the drop-off. Nothing. My husband looked at the phone, gave me a strange look, and handed me my phone. He asked me again that night what happened, but when I made efforts to describe what I saw, he seemed to get frustrated. He kept trying to compare it to known animals, like a monkey, bear, or dog, but I told him it wasn't even close. I did not return to that location for restroom breaks for the remainder of my time on that job. Can anyone tell me what I could have possibly seen? Like, seriously, what did I see? What the hell was that thing? Whoop sounds in remote Washington state. I went for a big hike while on vacation in WA last week. About 3 hours into the backcountry, I got that familiar feeling that a big animal was around. I usually equate it to a bear or mountain lion and start making my presence known, usually by whistling as I hike. Surprising a large predator on a small path cut into a terrifyingly steep hill is not something I try to do, so I moved slowly and made lots of noise. A few minutes later, I noticed something had made its way off the path, up a steep washout, but the sandy soil hid any outline of what the prints could have been, though they were noticeably large. I kept hiking. About an hour later, when I had doubled back down the hill, while walking the valley floor below, something went whoop at me from above, back where I had been hiking when I felt there was a large animal around. I was later informed by my family that lives there that Sasquatch are known to whoop, but I still lean toward a more prosaic explanation. Does anything else in the western woods whoop? This happened when I was 10. I'll give a backstory on the woods before I start. We live walking distance from a big trailhead, and this trailhead leads to a big open field. Back in the 1800s, there was a big mansion there. Because of the family's wealth, they employed a worker who fell in love with their daughter. The father discovered the truth. He fired and kicked the worker off the property. That same day, he hanged himself in one of the barns on the property. These owners also had slaves, who lived in little cabins spreading across the property. One day, 2 burglars were breaking into their barns and shacks as the rich family was away. They stumbled into one of the slave cabins, and upon finding someone home, they beat him to death in the cabin. Shortly after that, the mansion burned down mysteriously, ending 3 of the owners, including the father and 2 daughters. The mother was left alone where it said she lived on the burnt-down rubble of the house for the rest of her days. Basically becoming mad. On to the story. The first time we went, this cabin that the slave was ended in was still up. They used it as a historical site, and being dumb kids, we accidentally broke one of the windows, shattering it. We ran away laughing like nothing happened. 2 weeks later, I and about 6 people go play manhunt and end up in those woods. The sun was starting to go down but wasn't dark yet. I and 4 people found a little abandoned barn that we assumed belonged to the old owners. It was pitch black, and the 4 of us, at the same time, heard a deep male voice say, "Hello, everybody." This was loud too. We thought there was actually somebody in there with us. We ran out screaming and laughing. We thought nothing of it and that someone was still managing it. 4 years later, I go back with the same 4 people. There is a structure still standing, and we decided to climb it and light up. We're all sitting at the top when we hear a blood-curdling scream from a lady just past the trees. We froze, and again, a blood-curdling scream. We didn't think of ghosts right away. We thought of a mountain lion. As we start to climb down the structure to get the hell out of there. Just as I was getting my foot on the ground, right beside my ear, I hear, "Go away," in a very annoyed and angry way. Same man's voice from last time. Look around, friends have already started running, and I was more or less alone. Terrified, I went running. By this point the trailhead was almost black due to the trees. And I'm alone, and it's about a 2-mile walk back. Well, one of the things you will pass on the way back to our car was, of course, the cabin. I notice it, nothing strange, and as I'm running past the window we once broke, I see a ducking person in the window. Clear as day. Now I'm shitting myself, but I can see all my buddies waiting for me near the end. We hopped in cars and left. Today the site has turned into a ghost walk, as so many people have experienced similar things. The site is called the Hermitage of Lover's Lane. That's my last encounter there. I have gone back many times during the day, seeing if anything would happen. But none yet. Hiking experience. I went hiking earlier, around 7:10 p.m., alone. It was dark. The trail is 0.62 miles long for each lap and extends back to the farm area. When I got just about 3/4 of the way done, on the second half of the loop facing the way back, I had a shadow figure appear right next to me to my left and heard a dark, deep voice say, "Ooh." I have heard this same voice say, at least 3 times now in the past week or so. It sounds like a failing voice changer, like if someone was using a deep voice changer as its batteries were just about dead. I can't repeat the voice the same way when I try. It almost sounds like that, and then it lingers at the end part. It startled me enough to scream in public that there were cars in the distance less than 0.4 miles from me. I believe a lot of religious and even demonic spiritual experiences have been happening to me since I became a daily prayer after drug rehab 3 years ago, when I kicked drinking and drug abuse. I believe much of this stuff may be Jesus showing me what other people hear, and I also want to say the reason I believe Jesus, God, lets this stuff happen is for us to prove our love for Him by starting to go to church and stopping whatever evil stuff we did to bring the demons to attach to us. And if you live in a place that already had demons, it is because there was evil stuff on that land. Demons are there for us to defeat and then prove to God our love for Him. If anyone has had this experience with a voice that sounds like I described, please comment, and God bless. An unforgettable encounter. I have many ghost stories, but this one is just something I still think about a lot even as an adult. I grew up on a ranch in Mexico. My family had fields upon fields of corn, wheat, and some avocado. I used to play in the cornfield because that was behind my Nana's house. It was like a maze. I loved to run around there with my cousins. Well, one evening I trailed off too deep, and I got lost. I was 7 years old when this happened. As it got darker, I began to cry and roam aimlessly until I was grabbed by my arm. I screamed but quickly realized that it was my Nana's neighbor/BFF Petra. In Spanish, she was my Nana's comadre. The direct translation of that word is godmother. She baptized 3 of the 13 kids my Nana had. In my family, comadre/compadre is a nickname used as an endearment for the godparents of the kids they baptized. Well, my Nana's comadre Petra found me and said, "Mija, why are you out so late? You know stuff creeps at night." I told her I was lost. She reprimanded me gently, but then she told me I was far away from my Nana's house, and because it was cold, it would be best to go to her house. I held her hand as she led me to her house. She asked if I was hungry, and I told her I was. She told me she had just made flour tortillas and had beans cooking and should be finished soon. I was pleased because my favorite dish is tortillas and beans. We got to her house, and it was nice and warm. She sat me at her table, and she served me a huge bowl of beans and then cut some queso fresco for me. She made me some mini burritos, and I happily ate them. She then told me she was going to call my Nana to tell her that I was at her house. Again, Nothing was out of the ordinary, I felt fine, and I ate until I was extremely full. Then after my Nana's comadre came back from calling my Nana, she sat across from me and smiled at me. She was a small woman with the prettiest hazel eyes, and she said, "Mija, I couldn't get a hold of my comadre or compadre. They must be looking for you, so finish up and wash up." I nodded okay. "Also, I need you to tell my comadre that I am so sorry to have left without telling her goodbye," she added. "You're leaving, Nana Petra?" I asked here, feeling really sad. "Yeah, but don't worry, I will come back when the time is right," she smiled at me. I was really sad. "When are you leaving?" I asked her. "When I drop you off, I'll leave with my daughter," she told me. I was sad, but I agreed to tell my Nana. Now that I had finished eating, I washed my hands at her water pillar, and she led me back to the cornfield. She led me to the middle, and she kissed my hair and said, "Keep walking there in a straight line, you'll hear your Tata calling out for you, and remember to tell your Nana what I said." I told her yes and began to walk in a straight line like she had pointed out, and I could hear my Tata in the distance. I called back, and we found one another in no time. He was upset, he thought a coyote found me and hurt me, and he reprimanded me until we got to the house where my Nana was sitting on the dining room table. I ran up to her, and she asked me, "Where have you been?" I told her, "Nana Petra's house." And she went pale. She asked me to clarify that, and I told her that Nana Petra found me, fed me, and brought me to the field when she hadn't been able to reach them on the phone. I told her that she wanted to say goodbye, but she had to leave with her daughter. My Nana began to cry, and I was scared because she was very distraught. My Tata told me to stop lying, and because my Nana was crying, I began to cry with her. I swore it was true. I told them what I saw and what I ate in detail. My Tata told me that it was impossible because my Nana Petra had just died that morning. Also, they mentioned that my Nana didn't have a daughter, only sons. My Tata then called my uncle over, and they drove to my Nana Petra's house, and I was never told anything after what they had found. When I got older, my uncle told me that when they went to her house, they found the door open, the stove was hot, but the water pillar was empty. Also, the daughter mentioned that, come to find out, when my Nana Petra was young, like in her early 20s, she miscarried a baby, a girl. My Nana mourned for a very long time for her friend. My uncle was spooked, but they always say that my Nana Petra came to say goodbye to my Nana, but because I got lost, I sidetracked her. But nonetheless, it was spooky that she fed me, and I physically felt my Nana Petra, so I still have a hard time grasping the fact that it had been her spirit and not her physical self. I heard my name being called in the wilderness. So I moved a few months ago to outside of Anchorage and have been loving all the hiking and trails, and I make sure to hike a couple a week. Well, today I went on a shorter hike that leads around a conservation center, so normally there's quite a bit of traffic on that trail. I didn't have anyone to go with today, so I went there thinking at least I'll pass people every so often. So I got there, and there were only a couple of vehicles parked, so I was like, that's weird. Decided to just go do a quick loop since it gets dark early here in winter. So I had my bear bells on, and I'm pretty much immune to the sound of them, but I made it to the conservation center and turned around. So as I was headed back down the trail, there's a good-sized creek that runs along the side, and as I'm walking, I hear my name being called from the other side of the creek. I'm like, that's weird. Maybe someone I know is there, so I'm just like, hey? And nothing back. Okay, I kept walking and heard my name again, so I just stood there and looked around. Got closer to the brush to see if anyone was hiding but didn't see anyone. So right as I start walking, I hear "come here." And it turned into this weird gibberish language that got louder and louder. So I'm like, duck this, and started going, and a couple of hikers came up next to me, and they were like, that was really weird, we heard that too, and I'm like, thank God I'm not crazy, and we walked out together. When we reached the parking lot, only my vehicle and the couple's vehicle were present, indicating that no one else had driven there. I'm used to only being nervous about moose and bears, not whatever that was. Any ideas? The gibberish was super weird, it sounded like it could have been a sentence, but I didn't understand any of it. One of many of my paranormal encounters that has stuck with me since I was little. I grew up in a rural area of Honduras, a really spiritual country in the middle of Central America plagued with plenty of paranormal events that may not even compare to many places in the world. The country has a lot of weird, unexplainable things going on to the point that people are really just used to it, and another reason why people become really Christian. For a while, the country was the second most dangerous place in the world, with Iraq or Afghanistan being the first. Let that sink in. When I was in, 4th grade, There were legends the people around would tell about this kid-snatching creatures that would look similar to goblins or leprechauns that would live in jungle or deep forest areas, and they would snatch kids, which, honestly, at first I thought were all just legends, but after deeper examination, I came to realize they were very real, and they had some sort of time-manipulating ability that they would use on a group of kids to get them disoriented and be able to snatch some. After talking to many elders and families of people whose kids were snatched, a lot of cases had about the same thing to say, because some kids were able to escape the time manipulation somehow, including myself, but this was before it happened to me. The kids that would come back home with their brothers/sisters/friends missing would say that they lost them by the well, which the elders would proceed to ask the kids that were notoriously looking very tired, like they ran for miles, about where the well was, and the kids would try to show them, and every time they would take the elders to a place close to a river or areas close to rivers where there was obviously not a well, and there was obviously a kid or kids missing. So the elders would proceed with worry to ask the kids why they were so tired. Did they run away from someone? This was a legitimate question because human trafficking was a significant issue in those areas, causing widespread concern among the community. The kids looked at them and all answered the same thing, that they were tired because they were running away from the leprechaun. They appeared to be in a state of daze or hypnotic trance. Also good to note that drugs are prominent in that area, including drugs like devil's breath, but all these cases were similar, and the kids would never be found, neither dead nor alive. So, well, now with that long as context, I always thought that was just some weird shit till one day I was like 9, and me and a couple of friends decided to go swimming in the neighborhood river. We swam for a while till we started drifting a little lower along the river than we were just 2, so I decided to get off in this area that looked somewhat like a clear, sandy part filled with tall trees and bushes. Note that the area was a really deep forest that we all just lived close to, so when I got off, I started wandering around because I had never really gotten to be in that area before, and I kind of was on my own. As I walked along the clear area, I saw this really small trail that led to, like, a clear area, and in front, really sort of close in the middle of this clear section of jungle area, there was a really old looking well that, for some ducking weird reason, I thought about just walking there and looking at it closer since it looked so close, right? So I walked and I walked and I walked, and every time I walked, it almost felt like the well got further and further rather than closer and closer, and I walked again, and as I walked, I started hearing voices in the background, like people talking, but I knew I was in the middle of a jungle area, and there wasn't anyone there but me, so I instantly realized that this was the shit the kids were talking about. So I turned around, and the river was nowhere to be seen. The trail appeared to stretch for miles into the horizon, which made me feel really scared. And started running and running. The voices stopped, like background talking, and turned into, like, people, but, like, not big people, but, like, little people laughing out loud, and I ran and ran and ran and closed my eyes and asked God to please take me home as I ran and cried, and the laugh stopped, and somehow I felt like something weird was watching me, and then somehow I made it off and ran straight home. It turns out when I got home it was almost night, and my friends were not in the river anymore. I spent, like, 3 hours in that place, and somehow I got off. My friends said that they couldn't find me and thought I went home, so they went home after like 30 minutes of swimming in the river, but somehow I spent like 3 hours there. Shit still puzzles me now because when I grew up, I gained the courage to go see if the well or the trail was even real, and it turns out that shit wasn't. I never saw anything, but I came to the conclusion that really that was something really weird beyond my comprehension and that my perception of space/time was messed with in a way because somehow this happened, and there were also other people present there. And if I could say it was people aware of what they were doing to me because they were laughing at me for trying to run away for miles, but I think what got me off was me closing my eyes and asking God to please take me home, so I was immediately home, but it was drastically later than what I felt the time I spent there was. I have kept quiet about this one for a while because some people really tend to think you're crazy for having these experiences, but obviously I have told a few people about it. After all these years, I am still not able to comprehend what it was that I experienced. Why I don't go into the woods anymore. My mother moved out when I was young. Not young like infantile, but like 6th grade young. I knew what was happening. She moved into a house that was tucked away in the woods, only reachable from a dirt road that branched off of the main one about 2 miles away. The house was secluded in the woods. The move was shocking to say the least. Everything felt as if it happened so quickly, over the span of only a few months. It felt as if out of nowhere Mom was moving out and restarting her life. Only now, 8 years later, do I realize how tough that must have been on her, and I regret being the little asshole I was at the time. But going back, the move was a real shock. It took getting used to sleeping in a new house, in another bed, without my dad. Luckily, though, I visited each parent often, splitting the week 50-50 with each parent. I made friends with a pair of brothers who lived at the end of the dirt road that I was situated on. Those two boys likely played a significant role in helping me adjust to my parents' divorce. We would often spend hours, whole days, playing in the woods that surrounded our house. Discovering cool rocks and building forts to hang out in. Trying to find and corral turtles from the various ponds and swamps scattered throughout the woods. We lived the life of your cliché group of pals. We bonded over wrestling and riding our four-wheelers throughout the woods. Our go-to spot was the quarry located about halfway between our two houses but tucked deep into the woods, only really accessible through back trails and ATV paths. It must have been easily over 100 years since the quarry served any real purpose. We would spend so much time in the quarry, we would often bring spare gas tanks to refill when we eventually drained our own by trying to see who could hit the biggest jump. The quarry was our sandlot, our barrens, our true secret fort. I was playing outside on a Friday evening. It was either late September or early October. The sun was still high in the sky when I got back from school, and I wanted to make the most of it. My friends went to a different school district. Based off of where my mother lived at the time, I should have been going to their school as well, but since my father still lived in my previous school district, it just made it easier for me to attend the same school that I had been attending. Because of this, my friends didn't get home until about an hour and a half later than I did. Because of my forced solitude while waiting for my friends to show up, I was left to my own devices. Whenever this happened, it usually resulted in me wandering through the woods directly behind my house, looking for cool deer bones, or trying to start a fire in the backyard with the limited knowledge that I had from binge watching various survival shows. Today simply became one of the days where I wandered through the woods waving a big stick around as if it were a machete. After what felt like maybe 15 minutes at the most, I had stumbled my way to one of the points of interest that I and the boys would often visit. The abandoned mobile home was a cool spot due to the mystique surrounding it. Every visit to the trailer resulted in at least a handful of ridiculous conspiracy theories about the origins of the people inside and how the trailer had even gotten to its location in the woods in the first place, because there was really no road up to it. However, as I began to walk around the back of the mobile home, something was different from the previous visits. The door to the trailer was open. Being the little kid that I was curious about everything. When I should have gone back home and waited for my friends to return to relay my findings, I instead went in alone. Peering through the doorway, the dirty inside to what was the beginning of so many conversations began to finally reveal itself to me. You entered yourself into the kitchen area. Covered in dirt and grime, leaves, and various piles of raccoon droppings, the kitchen still resembled something you'd find if occupied. What lay in the sink was a single set of dining ware. One fork, one spoon, one plate, etc. To your right after passing through the doorway was the living room, or the saddest possible excuse for one I have ever seen. A ragged, stained couch sat facing out across a window that took up nearly the entire wall. A single nightstand lay next to it, and that was all. When I walked through to the bedroom, the breath was punched out of me. Tied to the bed frame was what only slightly resembled a deer, which I believe it once was. The large, half-white-skinned deer lay on the bed, contorted into something so inhumane it would be imprinted on the insides of my eyes even up to now. The deer's contents lay spread out over the carcass and left sprawling onto the floor, already stained a dark crimson from previous instances. The head of the deer was torn off at the base. It hung on the wall above the bed, its black eyes staring into my soul. The wall was painted with smeared blood trails and claw marks cutting deep into the wall. I stood frozen. I tried to scream. I tried to make some noise at least, but I just stood, locked in a gaze with the black void staring back at me from the wall. I couldn't move no matter how hard I tried. I tried to run but could only shake as the deafening quiet of the forest surrounded me. A shriek like none other echoed throughout the woods. The sound of everything I had ever feared finally manifested itself. The hair on the back of my neck stood straight up. Whatever banshee in the woods made that horrible sound shook me out of the state that I was in. I rushed to the door. Getting home was the only thing that mattered. Home was safe. Mom would be there, and she'd know what to do, and I'd be alright. I passed through the doorway, but on the first step down, I sensed something. Something had possessed me to stop and look. What I saw was indescribable. Not of this realm. Not real. About 500 feet into the trees, standing hunched over and leaning on a tree, was nothing I had ever seen. The creature was merely a silhouette, not black in color, but merely void of all light. It was the shape of a man. The limbs were all bent at unnatural angles and irregularly long. The face of the creature is what still haunts me today. It was merely flat, empty of all features, except for a large, gaping mouth. The creature's neck twitched with seemingly uncontrolled spasms, shaking its head violently, Actions that would snap the neck of any man. I watched as the monster's mouth stretched wide and let out another shriek. The snapping of the creature's neck whipped the shriek in all directions. It lunged forward, sprinting at me as it convulsed. Everything in my being told me to run away. To move. To do something, but again, I froze. I gasped. A deep, violent inhale kickstarted my body. I turned, and I ran as fast as I possibly could. Tree after tree passed me. The sound of the beast roared behind me. I could feel its hot breath on the back of my neck, but it never reached me. It was toying with me. It wanted to play with its food. It wanted me alive on that bed, just as the deer had been before it had its entrails ripped from it. I ran as fast as I possibly could. My feet couldn't keep up. In an instant, my foot had hit a log buried underneath a pile of leaves, and I hit the ground. I looked up, and in a blurred vision I saw it. The monster stood over me, shaking maniacally as it screamed. The only thing I could do was turn my head. To hopefully see nothing as I faded to black. I began to close my eyes out of fear when I saw two helmets ride towards me. I turned my head back towards the monster, and it was gone. It had disappeared, no trace of whatever that thing was that had almost killed me. I lay in the leaves, paralyzed from what had just occurred, the fear still weighing heavy in my mind. My friends gave me a ride back to my house. When I had tripped over the log that was hidden in the leaves, I had twisted my ankle and wasn't able to walk on it. After a well-deserved lecture by my mother about not going into the woods alone, I and my friends stayed in the house until it was time for them to go and for me to go to bed. I woke up that night in a cold sweat. Desperately in need of a drink, I hobbled into the kitchen and began to fix myself a glass of water. That's when I made the mistake of looking out the kitchen window. On the other side of the fence, a creature stood there, shaking violently in the moonlight, fixated on me. The next thing I knew, I blinked, and it was gone. My mother moved in with her new boyfriend not long after my encounter with whatever hunted inside those woods. That blood-curdling shriek still haunts me to this day. I've moved to the city now in the hopes that whatever that thing was can never reach me here, and I pray that no one ever has to hear the scream. Drums in the wilderness. It was around 8 years ago, and a friend and I were hiking into the Desolation Wilderness in California. We had hiked for some 3 to 4 hours in when we realized we hadn't seen another human for at least 2 hours. We decided to rest to decide what to do. We figured we could go a little further, as we had gotten a pretty early start and were confident we could make it out before sundown, but we had the basic survival gear, so we weren't worried. About 20 minutes later, I paused to admire how far we had gotten. That was when I heard the drums. We were so far out I don't remember having heard any signs of civilization since about an hour into the hike, save for the occasional plane overhead. It wasn't very loud, but it was rhythmic, bum bum bum, just a continuous beat. Now, the friend I was with has never claimed to be any expert about the area but had been there some time and had spoken to local trail guides and such about the area. No one we knew was aware of any significant Native American population in that area. That's not even to mention that there were no roads or any easy passage into the area we were in other than the trails we were on. We walked for around another 30 to 40 minutes, maybe longer, as I wasn't really keeping good track of time, hearing the drumbeat the entire time. Sometimes it was louder, sometimes quieter, but there regardless. We were out there after some of the first snows of the season and probably shouldn't have gone as far as we did, as it was very deep in some places. This fueled my skepticism that any decent group had taken the 5-ish hours, we hike light and go reasonably fast, to make it out that far before us. We eventually decided that the sun had passed the pinnacle and that we should make our way back. The drumming was still playing. We heard it for at least another 2 hours before it finally faded. I don't remember hearing any chanting or any other sign that something was going on. I know next to nothing of supernatural/spiritual legends of the forests of America. I know of things like the Wendigo and skinwalkers and those sorts of native legends. But like I mentioned above, no one we knew was aware of there being any significant native presence there. Maybe in the past though? It would have been less eerie if we started hearing it, and then a few minutes of walking later, 20 perhaps, the sound faded, but it didn't. It stuck with us for a while. I am really curious to know if anyone else has ever experienced anything like it. What happened at Dry River Shelter 3 one night? Last summer, a good friend and I embarked on a backpacking trip through the White Mountain National Forest in New Hampshire. As fairly experienced day hikers, we felt comfortable in the Whites for our inaugural overnight trip. While planning, my buddy Ellis figured we could hike to a backcountry campsite to make our first wilderness night a little more fun. I wasn't going to disagree. Beautiful views, historic trails, and protected nights in the Dry River Wilderness. I was stoked, to say the least. Before any hiking trip, I do a little internet search on the trails or shelters I will be coming across. Throughout the mid-late 1900s, there were a series of these lean-tos up and down the dry river wilderness meant for backpackers or through hikers really looking to escape the crowds in more popular areas of the forest. Though as time went on and the Forest Service had other more pressing matters, many of these shelters were dismantled. Dry River Shelter Number 3 stands as the sole surviving shelter in this wilderness area. On the morning of our hike, I met Ellis at the trailhead, and we set off. The sky was overcast, bringing with it a dense fog throughout the forest. The weather left us with nearly no visibility, so there went our stunning views. At least the trail consisted of prime, technical New England rock scrambling alongside the Ammonoosuc River. Ellis and I made it up to the Presidential Ridge, stopping by the Lakes of the Clouds. The hut was filled with day hikers, backpackers, and through hikers all socializing together. We were even rewarded with some sun and a brief glimpse of the dry river valley on the summit of Mount Monroe before the fog rolled back in. With dwindling views and a stiff wind, Ellis and I hustled below the tree line, down to the Dry River Shelter Number 3, our home for the night. Once we dropped off the ridge into the valley, we entered the wilderness zone where rangers patrolled sparingly. Time to really be alone in the wild. As we trekked into the wilderness, all signs of civilization disappeared, and the trail was densely overgrown. Although it had been raining all week, there were no footprints in the mud either. At least we would have some relaxing isolation, I figured. After about an hour or so of descending, Ellis spotted the lean-to just as our legs were asking for relief. A gorgeous old timber structure with a well-used fire pit alongside a cold mountain river. Pristine camping. As we settled in and explored the site, I found a small, bound notebook nestled into the corner of the structure. On the cover someone wrote Dry River Shelter Number 3. Out of curiosity I opened it but found nothing more than a lone man's name scribbled onto the first page and a date. Just your standard camping log. Oddly, the man had signed the book just the day before. We saw no footprints or signs of human or even animal disturbance on the trails or here at the shelter. Rain can wash away tracks, but not all signs of animal life. Something felt off to me. I showed it to Ellis, who found it curious but thought nothing more of the single name. He convinced me that the man was probably a hiking veteran and a professional at LNT. I bought into Ellis' thoughts on the situation to ease my mind. As the sun set, we started a roaring fire alongside the riverbank. Ellis commented on how quiet the location was, having not seen another soul beyond the chirp of birds since leaving the Crawford Path. The silence was eerie, but we figured that city life desensitized us to the wild. The sun was setting, and we grew tired with the darkness. Ellis took the lean-to, and I spent the night in my tent. Sleep came quickly after hiking 8+ miles with 20 pounds on my back, but this didn't last long. A brutally sharp slapping noise woke me. The only thing I could compare the noise to would be someone swinging a 2x4 into a tree or snapping a thick branch. I figured it was a bear searching for our food bag hanging in a tree, some 20 to 50 yards away. Nothing out of the ordinary for New Hampshire. Sleep overtook me once again, and I remember waking up to the sun rising over the peaks. I stumbled out of my tent to see Ellis also waking up slowly. As we made our morning oats and coffee, I wandered around the site again to see if I could find the marks the bear left. Instead I noticed something odd. The small notebook was open. I swear that I put it back where I found it. Closed and in the back corner of the shelter. Not open on the floor. Hey Ellis, were you checking out this camp log last night? Nah, I passed the duck out, man. It's not like there's anything to read in it anyways. He responded. Are you sure? I commented as I bent over to pick it up. The lone hiker's name was not so lonely anymore. At least 20 more names filled the pages. The lone traveler, whose name was originally on the first page, could now be found several pages deep into the notebook. I tossed it to Ellis, whose face instantly dropped the second his mind registered what was on the page. Great, now I knew it wasn't just some dehydration delusion of the previous day. Dude, we must have been seeing things last night. There is no way we missed all of these names. How the duck could we? Ellis said. This is when I began to tell Ellis about the slapping noise during the night. I received nothing other than instant denial. These sounds were not the result of some hooligans or backwoods crazies harassing us. Ellis was convinced. Rather sternly, he commented, "It's a bear, Jack. It's just a bear. Let's go now." And well, go, we did. Ellis led us out of the site and on our way home not 10 minutes later. A year has passed, and I'm still not quite sure what happened during our night at the Dry River Shelter Number 3. The memory of seeing a single name written on the front page of the notebook is so crisp in my mind, I couldn't have mistaken it. Could I have mistaken the noises I heard in the new additions to the book? Ellis feels the same way about the whole scenario. What do you think? Could we just have been too dehydrated and delusional? Or were we not welcomed by the New Hampshire wilderness? Unwanted visitors deep in the woods. In my college days, now 20 years ago, I and my friends often took off for the North Georgia mountains on the weekends. When we wanted to smoke, drink, and commune with nature, these mountains were perfect. On the weekend this unsettling event occurred. I, my friend Bill, and his German Shepherd, Monty, headed out towards Sky Valley. It was the beginning of the fall semester at UGA, and not much was going on yet. We had found an area where a dirt road led back a half mile, and then we would hike in another mile or so and set up camp near a creek. Excellent trails were nearby with fun places to explore, not to mention flat ground perfect for setting up camp. Bill and I arrived at our spot around 4 p.m. and got a fire going. We were musicians, Bill a guitar player and me a percussionist. So we sparked a joint and started jamming. Around 10, after jamming a while, we chatted about life and girls before tucking in for the night. It was a clear night, and so we just slept under the stars. It is important to note we had never seen any sign of other people in this area during our other trips. At about 2 a.m. in the morning, I was awoken by Monty growling. It was a deep, guttural growl. Bill was still dead to the world, and I sat up to look around and listen, thinking maybe an animal had come near our campsite. The fire was only embers at this point. I heard barely audible voices in the distance. Focusing on the area of the voices, I saw a faint red glow, followed by another faint red glow to the left of the first. This was about 100 yards away. My mind connected what I was seeing. Cigarette embers were burning, and they were getting closer. "Bill," I whispered. "Wake up." Bill roused from his sleep, and I explained what was going on. At this point Monty started barking as the strangers approached camp. By the time we stood up, they were in the camp. Completely unfazed by the now rabid 70-pound German Shepherd, two incredibly unkempt late 30s, early 40s deliverance-looking mofos walked up on us. Bill told Monty to calm down. I will never forget the look of these guys. Skinny as hell, about 5 feet 8 inches, shirts caked in grime, mangy beards, and probably 5 teeth between the two men. Each had huge knives attached to their belt buckles. "What are you boys doing way out here? It looks like you're having a good time." We responded and told them we had been out there to camp and drink some beer. They asked if we had any weed, and we gave them a joint. They looked around a bit and asked if we wanted to smoke with them. We declined, saying we were headed out early. Throughout the conversation, anything Bill or I said, they looked at each other before responding. Finally, before they left, one of them said, "Y'all stay safe, you never know who you could run into out here." Followed by a laugh as they walked away. We packed up early and left. While this isn't as creepy as other stories, these guys were the epitome of backwoods redneck. The fact that we only awoke because of the dog still sketches me out to this day. Skinwalker experience, Lake Como, Pennsylvania. Every summer since I was 6, 2012, I have gone to a sleepaway camp called Lahican up in the Poconos, Lake Como, Pennsylvania. The camp has around 5,000 kids at a time and has a relatively excellent reputation. This previous summer, 2022, I encountered what I believe was a skinwalker or something of that type. To provide some context, many horrific incidents have occurred at the camp over the past 5 years. My skate instructor got kicked out and sent to an asylum for going insane, and the owner saw something in the street and crashed into a tree, where he cracked his entire skull in half. There were also demonic symbols carved into the burn pit. They were not able to figure out who did it but just assumed it was kids trying to be edgy or counselors trying to mess with each other. But basically, aside from these creepy things, it is a normal camp. Kids do dumb shit like smoke weed, sneak out, hook up, whatever, but it is a pretty normal experience. So it was my final summer at camp, so I decided to make it worth it. I was going to sneak out as much as possible, so most people just wanted to sleep, so the first few nights I would just sneak out alone and go to this tiny pavilion at the top of the camp for phone reception. There was a tiny path through the woods behind my cabin that was basically abandoned, but it was a really quick way up to the upper field, and I wouldn't have to worry about getting caught since it's above the main camp. For 3 nights in a row I walked up there, and the best way to explain the feeling of walking in the wooded parts every night was an impending feeling of doom. I just felt like I was being watched and like I was going to die, but being the rational person I try to be, I would say to myself, of course it feels like you are being watched, there are animals, bears, etc. So I continued, and on the 3rd night, as I was walking, I genuinely felt a sense that I was going to die. I got up to the pavilion, which is on a flat field, and stayed there with my flashlight on until sunrise came and eventually made my way back to the cabin. The next night these two guys invited my friend and me to go smoke, so at 2:30 a.m. we got ready and headed out. I felt much better having a friend with me, and as we were joking around and overall excited, I thought I was just being paranoid. We make our way down to the canteen, which is just a large, wide, empty hallway with booths lining one side and arcade machines lining the other. It is pitch black, and since we don't have service, we assume they may be in the bathroom, which is located at the back of the corridor. As we make our way back, we see a black figure at the end of the hallway, which is an open half wall to the outside. We scream half jokingly, and the figure just stays put. We start yelling, "Who is it? Come on!" Assuming it was a counselor or the guys. We move closer, maybe 7-ish feet now, and shine our flashlights on the figure, and it runs into the bathroom. We wait outside the bathroom for 10 minutes, confused as to why we haven't heard a toilet flush or giggling. Trying to figure out who is in there and why they are being so secretive about it. Note, the bathroom has no windows and no way out other than the door we are now standing outside of. So we wait, and as we are holding our breath trying to hear any sound of life, like breathing or footsteps, there's nothing. Eventually, after 15 minutes, we count down from 3 and tell them to pull their pants up jokingly because we are coming in. We go in, and there is no one there, no sign that anyone could have been there. My friend and I look at each other, obviously weirded out but not wanting to say anything, and my friend, who is the furthest from believing in any supernatural stuff, just told me to run and not look back. When we get back up to the cabin, we go to the bathroom and close the door. I ask her why we had to run and joke about how someone was probably just trying to mess with us. She looks at me more scared than I ever would have thought to see her and says, "If we put our flashlights on it, why was it still pitch black?" I couldn't see any clothing, or features, or anything other than just the outline of a person. I think about this too and smile and say we should probably just head to bed. I wasn't able to sleep all night, and all I could think about was that it better have been my mind playing tricks on me, whether from being in the dark or from being tired. Like how you see shadows out the corner of your eye when you haven't slept in a while. The Nightly Visitor. HASANYONEENCOUNTEREDATTACHMENTS? I wanted to share my experience that I had encountered going to a cemetery with my ex-boyfriend at the time. This all happened a year and a half ago, before we split. It was around fall, and it was cold. We decided to go to an old mining cave museum not far from where we lived. It was roughly around an hour's drive. Although our experience was the normal go to and head back home type of thing, we were also told that this museum had a grave site. A grave memorial, if I'm being specific. Well, my ex-boyfriend and I went to go check it out before we headed back home. The hike to the place was fairly close to the parking lot. But it was approximately a 20 to 30 minute walk. For our walk there, we didn't really talk, rather just enjoyed the trails and the stream down the small creek it had. During this walk, the distance between the mining museum and the gravesite seemed to be a lot quieter than most historic mining sites. I remember it feeling calming and peaceful. But when we got closer to the gravesite, I had this weird feeling in the pit of my stomach that we weren't really alone that day. I remember feeling butterflies in my gut but feeling like we were being watched. More specifically, me. Since it was on an open field, the grass was all there was. But behind me, as I walked behind my ex-boyfriend, I felt as if I was being followed. I remember my breath heaving for air, the air felt stuffy, it felt closed in. To me, I was getting sort of uncomfortable and rethinking my choice if we made the right call in finding this place. It felt like I was invading a space that wasn't even mine, and I felt unwelcome. Since my ex was a huge skeptic about everything, he would always say that I was just overreacting. But this felt different. As we stopped near the gravesite, there were just the remains of an old gravestone. There wasn't much of it except where the workers flagged the site, marking it with yellow strands of plastic. During this time I felt uneasy. The feeling wasn't going away. I felt like it was only affecting me and not my ex at the time. The feeling of a presence still lingered. I felt as if I was standing next to someone that wasn't there. More particularly, I felt watched. But I think I made the mistake of asking an open-ended question. We stood around the grave, and since my ex liked to read historic markers, we stayed there for another 30 minutes until we headed back to the parking lot. He didn't seem to be affected. But I sort of asked, "If there is anything here, you are welcome to follow us." I don't know what came over my head, but that presence I felt was not going away. It felt like the whole walk towards the site, the air changed. But after heading back, the air felt and seemed lighter and normal again. I wasn't heaving anymore, and I had stable breathing. I didn't feel anxious or nervous anymore, not until he drove me back to my place. I am a deep sleeper, so if you made a noise, I wouldn't even notice. But that night, I woke up with my soul almost jumping out of my body. It was around 3:30 a.m. that particular night. I was sleeping in bed, like normal. That's when I had this feeling of someone watching me through the room. So I woke up. My eyes were heavy. Hoping to fall back asleep, but that didn't happen. That's when I heard something move off my closet shelf. I was startled. I saw my bag, almost the size of a suitcase, shuffle around. I thought it was my mother, since we share a room, and she would always go use the bathroom late at night. But this time it wasn't her. As I watched the bag, it instantly fell on the ground. My mother, on the other hand, was dead asleep no matter how hard it hit the ground. I had this feeling the unknown presence was next to the lamp I had. I looked to my left as I watched the lamp. Also, my room is filled with 3 mirrors, but they aren't in any way touching to where they create a vortex. As soon as I was staring at this invisible thing, I saw the lamp move. Physically move out of place. It felt like it was angry. I don't know what happened that night because the next thing that this presence did, it either came with bad intentions. After the lamp physically moved, this gust of air came blowing out of nowhere. It was incredibly cold, like it was raining outside or it was around 15 degrees outside. I felt the whole room shake as if I were experiencing an earthquake or explosion. My heart rate was beating so fast that not only did I experience air running through the room or see my bag fall on the floor. This presence also tried to break the mirror I have hanging on the wall in my room. From then on it felt like an hour. But as soon as that happened, the room was quiet. Also, the air in the room changed to what I had experienced earlier that day with my ex. My mother woke up, but she woke up too late to notice these things with the naked eye. To this day, I don't know who followed me home, but it sure made its presence known to let me know that I was clearly not welcome there or alone. A forest returned belongings to me, and I still think about this years later. I don't really believe in the paranormal, but it still fascinates me. I keep an open mind even if my default is apprehension or disbelief, because I like the idea that extraordinary things can happen to people. It's interesting, if that makes sense. However, there is one scenario that happened to me that I still cannot explain to this day. This happened some years ago. I went to visit a friend some 4 to 5 hours away. I was 21 or 22, this was my first time traveling to visit friends at this distance. I'd never even taken a train before. My friend used to live in my city, but his family moved when we were younger. We still kept in touch, he'd visit sometimes, and this was the first time I'd visit him. His family lives in a much smaller town, and it was also fairly rural. Behind his house was an area of untamed wilderness I'll call a forest for clarity, even if it probably didn't classify as one. Just lots of trees and brush left unmaintained and to nature. It was their house, then 30 to 40 feet to a chicken wire fence, and then a further 250 to 300 feet is where you start entering the forest. My friend and his siblings alleged if you left a belonging on the other side of the fence, not necessarily in the forest, it would be returned to you some time later. I love it. Super cryptic and of low stakes, I'll run with their story for now. They have shared other stories with me regarding different aspects of the forest, but I will concentrate on this particular one. The first night I was there, I threw a hat I brought across the fence, and a few hours later my friend told me he found it on his porch. This didn't seem like proof of anything to me, I assumed he was messing with me. I tried again the same night, monitoring my friend in the process, and when we went out to have a cigarette, I found the hat on the porch. Whatever, one of his siblings could be in on the prank. The second night, unbeknownst to my friend, I took a belt buckle of his and threw it as far as I could across the fence. And again, it suffered the same fate, on their front porch just a couple hours later. I still wasn't super convinced, maybe someone saw me and quickly went looking. At this point I started to get creeped out, but my disbelief still prevailed. The third night, we decided to go into the forest. It was me, my friend, and my friend's friend. We climb over the fence, start walking across toward the forest, and get about 50 feet deep when all of our flashlights go off in unison. My friend yelled for us all to run back, and I didn't question it. I bolted. However, in the process, I dropped my hat, I was fidgeting with it as we walked. When we got back into the house, my hat was inside. In their basement, in my suitcase, zipped up. This shook me greatly because my friend already had a sizable head start versus me when we all ran. There's no way he could have gotten back to pick up the hat. I was with him when we all reached the house. Compounding this, we ran a straight line right back to the house. There's no way someone could have grabbed it and run a different route to beat us home. And to top it all off, we locked the house before we embarked on our night walk. And it wasn't a duplicate hat, either, unless they managed to replicate the wear and tear of my hat to a T for this one gotcha. We didn't talk about it. I was done with it and wanted nothing more to do with the forest. We all basically went, oh, this just happened, and just dropped it completely. I left my hat with him when I left for home, half hoping and half dreading it would find its way back with me at home later on, but it never did. My friend and I kind of fell out of favor with each other for unrelated reasons shortly after this. If we ever reconcile, and it's been years since, I want to talk with him about this and maybe even visit again. Their stories of occurrences in this forest are numerous, and if just for my curiosity, I'd love to explore this more. Someone, please help me. Everything started just 1 year ago, last month. We are all in high school still and are trying to get answers. This is real, and I am nothing short of clueless. I live on the eastern side of Ohio near the Appalachian Mountains. When the foundation of my house was being built, in the dirt that was being moved, they found an insane amount of arrowheads. I live on a rather large hill and have around 45 to 50 acres of land. My family had an archaeologist come, and he said he had never seen this amount of arrowheads in one single site before in his entire career. It is believed that my house was dug onto a burial ground or where a war took place long ago in the Native American era. To further this, on my property are old railroad tracks. Unused now but in the 1800s used frequently. According to my town's records, a train crashed and blew up here, killing a group of men on board. So it begins. The first night all started a year ago, last month. September 25, 2021. A group of my friends, me plus 5 others, was at my house for a bonfire. It had been something we usually do, and just to say, we do not drink while we have our fires, so we are all in our right minds. To start, I got up to put some more wood on the fire. As I was doing so, we all thought we heard my mom yell for us, "Hey!" So, I called her, and she claimed she was lying in her bed watching TV and had never gotten up. We played it off as our minds playing some tricks, and we were just hearing some things. As the night went on, we started to run out of firewood. I and 2 others walked down to the bottom of my hill to get some more wood. When we got back up, the other 3 friends were gone. They were merely teasing us, as that's the nature of our bond. We think, oh, just let them go for a little bit without trying to look for them, and they will eventually get bored. A few minutes go by, and the 3 of us who weren't hiding heard this blood-curdling, screeching scream off in the distance. For reference, you can see a lot from the top of my hill. We immediately get up, worried and nervous that it is one of our friends. We look into the distance that the scream is coming from, and we see nothing. The screaming stops and then starts again. We start yelling for our other friends and calling their phones. All of a sudden, 2 of them pop out and start asking us questions about why we look so freaked. We explain to them while still wondering where the last one of them is. The last person comes out, and we begin to explain to him. An expression falls onto his face, and we know he has something to say as well. As he was alone crawling up the side of the hill getting ready to scare us, he heard someone ask, "Who are you?" In a man's voice, another reference, there is a house that my family is renovating about 50 yards from the top of the hill. He was between the hill and the house. After telling him that no one lives there and it is owned by my family, he immediately freaks out and says, "If no one lives there, then there is someone out here with us." We all run down to my house and immediately tell my mom about everything that we have heard. We go back out and search the house that my family owns to be sure there is no one sneaking in and living there. There was nothing, no one. My friends leave a few minutes later. I go back to the top of the hill to get my car that I drove up. As I'm up there, I hear screams. As if someone was in pain screaming. Moaning and groaning very loudly. I get in my car, drive to my house, and quickly go inside for the night. This is just the beginning. Night 2 was just 1 month later, on October 23, 2021. The same group of us were out there having a fire, -2. Plus my dog. 2 of my friends couldn't make it that night, so there are now 4 of us and my dog. We decide to be badasses and explore my woods. The woods we went to are located on the opposite side of my hill from where my house is. This chunk of forest takes up 80 to 90% of the land my family owns. We start a little fire, go through the game plan, and then we walk. They are all following me with flashlights because they obviously do not know my land. I know every single inch of my woods because I used to spend a lot of time back there. As we are walking, one of our friends asks, "What's down here?" So, I take us down towards the railroad tracks where we hear some brush break. Thinking it's just a deer or an animal, considering we are in the middle of the woods, we brush it off and just keep walking. I take them down into a clearing. It is a place that leads back to the top of the hill if we would have kept walking straight. It is a deep but small valley type area. All of a sudden, as we are walking, We all hear the loudest boom noise that we have ever heard. It was as if someone had let off dynamite in the tree lines above us. My dog even jumps. We run about 50 feet before regrouping to figure out what just happened. At this point we are in the lowest part of the valley area. I shine my light towards my dog, and he is running away back to the top of my hill. In my mind that scares me because he is a German Shepherd who has killed a coyote. I instruct my friends to scan our surroundings for any potential threats. I and one other see a set of blue eyes in the opening behind us. They move left and disappear. Then come back again, moving right. At this point we are all looking at them. We watched this happen 2 more times, and then the eyes didn't come back. Scared that whatever it was on the move, we ran back to the top of my hill. We took a break for a while. We made the decision to leave the sleeping bear alone. 8 months later, in the summer, I have a fire. There was a lot that happened between 2 of my other friends, and our foreign exchange student went back to Spain. That limited the group to 3. Me and 2 others are just chilling out around a fire. The 3 of us have done this around 4 to 5 times now, and the same thing happens every time. We hear faint whispers but can never make out words. We hear brush movements. We hear cows that sound like they should be 20 yards away, yet the farthest farm is around a mile. My friend, a skilled hunter, knows a lot about cows and other strange animal sounds we can't identify. As odd and as weird as all this seems, ever since a year ago around this time, I have been getting déjà vu. It scares me every time I get it because when I do, something bad happens. Just some examples: my uncle died the next day, I had to put down my dog the next day, my girlfriend's mom had a heart attack, my girlfriend got into a car accident, I broke out into hives, and many, many other examples I could list on forever. Along with the déjà vu, I have a reoccurring dream. Long story short, I'm walking in my woods, 2 of my friends disappear, and there is this black outline staring at me. As I continue to have this dream over and over again, every time I do, I wake up in a sweat and see the thing that was in my dream in my room. Just staring back at me. I can hear this thing whispering but cannot make out the words. After a few seconds of its presence, it goes away, and I somehow can go straight back to sleep. In addition to the nights at my house, I and a group of friends decide to go to the famous Egypt Valley. Out to Louisa Fox's grave, death location, and to circle the cemetery, one of the oldest cemeteries in the area. I'll spare you the details of all of those areas. If you want to know, look them up, they are rather famous. Anyways, we go out to these locations, and as we are walking back to our cars, there are handprints on the one I was riding in. My friends swear it wasn't them. One set of hands was freakishly huge, and the other set was very tiny. We compared sizes, and none of our hands fit the ones on the car. Ever since all of this, my life has been rather horrible. Very few things have gone well for me. Whether it be the death of loved ones, the death of a friend, the death of a pet, sickness, injury, or vehicle accidents. Holy shit, as I type the last sentence, I get déjà vu. I can't take this anymore. It's getting so hard to wake up every single day. I hate sleeping for fear of dreaming, and I hate being awake for fear of déjà vu. I don't want anyone else to suffer because of my actions. My friends and my family believe that a native spirit haunts my lands. Some of my friends believe that the spirits of the men who died in the train crash, which occurred 1 week before the second encounter in 1886, haunt my lands. My family and I are religious. I have tried to get closer to God and be a better Christian, and it has helped. My dreams went away for a little while, but as the time grows closer to the second encounter, it's getting worse than it's ever been. I have no idea what to do. All I want is some answers. Or for someone to tell me I'm not crazy. All of the facts I have given, aside from the archaeologist, are from town records from my town's library. The info about the natives comes from simple online research about which tribe lived in the area I am in. Sure enough, the coordinates of where my house is compared to the area lines of native tribes sit perfectly on the split between Shawnee and Cherokee. Which would explain the amount of arrowheads and possibly what the hill I currently live on is used for. Someone please help me. Shocking encounter while camping deep in the Maine woods. In 1998 my family and I went on our canoe camping trip in Aroostook County, Maine, pretty much as far north as you can get. There is a stream that feeds off of a lake that eventually dumps into the St. John River. We'd get dropped off at a bridge that crosses this stream and spend a couple of days drifting down to the St. John River fishing and camping, and then we'd get picked up where the stream ended. This is in the middle of nowhere, about as pristine of a wilderness as you can get. At dusk on day 2, we had set up on this island that splits the stream. The water was pretty low, and we'd have to portage around the island anyway, as it was way too rocky to canoe down this little stretch. We got camp set up and a fire started just before dusk. My parents were cooking up dinner alongside a couple of nice, fat brook trout we had caught earlier in the day. My sister and I were just fooling around throwing rocks in the stream. Suddenly our mom called us over in a little bit of a panicked voice. We saw instantly why. Our dad was standing with a stranger a little ways from our camp. The man was pretty short, like 5'3" inches. White in complexion. He had a bushy, wild beard and was wearing clothes that looked like they were made from burlap sacks. He was leaning on a musket like a walking stick. He had a backpack of sorts made from what looked like a burlap sack and some sticks tied together. He had animal furs rolled up on top of the backpack. He looked as shocked to see us as we were of him. He sounded like he was speaking French, but my mother, who could speak some French, could maybe understand one word out of 10. He pointed at us and then behind himself and kept saying something along the lines of tattoo sack. My mother pointed at him and asked if he was from Quebec or Canada, and he just looked confused. He seemed to be really interested in my father's jacket. He also seemed really interested in our camp and kept pointing at our tents and canoes and was definitely asking us questions, but we had no idea what he was saying. Eventually my dad, who was already wary of this guy, motioned him to go away. My mother was doing a go away motion with her hand and saying leave in French, and he seemed to get the message. He waded through the knee-high water off the little island to the other side and just disappeared. Like as soon as he hit the other side, he just vanished. With all of us looking at him. We were all pretty freaked out at this point. My mother was like, let's pack up and go right now. My dad convinced her to just stay the night, as moving camp and portaging in the dark isn't the best idea. My dad said he would stay awake until dawn to keep watch in an effort to comfort us all. Plus, he had his pistol with him. We were all just talking about how absolutely weird this whole situation was when my sister said, yeah, and he had no shoes on. Just a bunch of, like, leather. The whole situation just freaked us out. To this day we have no idea what we saw. It wasn't a ghost or anything, as this guy was clearly trying to communicate with us and was clearly aware of us. We had gone on this same camping trip 3 times. That was the last time per my mother's orders. The trees outside my window get closer every night. Trees could move in a forest every night, and you probably wouldn't even notice. There are thousands of the things in even a small forest. You couldn't possibly know the position of every one. Sure, if your go-to spot had moved, you might be suspicious. But even then, if you don't go often, you'd probably just think you misremembered. Forests have few exact landmarks. It's the same all around. You'd be forgiven for not noticing the change. For not noticing that the trees are alive. But when they're at the edge of your window, bridging between the vast empty black of the night and the safety of your home, you'll notice. When the outside world can tap upon your glass, you notice those things. A child cries, I think I heard a noise at the window. The mother consoles, it's just a branch in the breeze, honey. Go back to sleep. You read that and feel relief from the explanation. I read that and feel fear. What could be worse than a tree at the window? The tree was absent the day before. I've lived on the edge of Inwood for over a decade. It acts as the border to the west of our small town. There's my street, with Inwoods just beyond the back fencing. The woods continue for miles until the next town. They attempted to chop down the trees a few years back to expand our quaint neighborhood. The project was cancelled after just a few days in favor of expanding east instead. What made them change their minds? What did they find that made them want to head in the exact opposite direction? They are afraid of something in those trees. Something lurks deep within the roots, revealing itself in the bark. Perhaps even the leaves themselves, as they gracefully sway unsuspectingly. They have every right to be terrified, we all do. But I wasn't always scared of Inwood. Quite the opposite, actually. I had a friend, her name was Emily. We used to play in the woods often as children. Climbing the trees, building dens. Nobody knew that place like us. If trees had moved back then, we'd have known about it. While I long to cherish those memories, my current understanding of the woods prevents me from looking back with fondness. One memory does stick out to me in particular, though. I always held a special destination near and dear to my heart. A few minutes walk through the woods, staying on the dirt path and keeping to the clearings, there's a big tree. It stands alone proudly, as if there is something different about it. A forest, by definition, is a large group of trees, but this one didn't feel like part of it. It was a tree in a forest, but it didn't belong there. The tree was its own thing. It was special. It quickly became our go-to spot, and one day, we marked it as our own by carving our initials into the bark. W.E. Emily went missing in those same woods just a few days later. It was our last time together. I think about it a lot. I was 12 at the time. My parents didn't let me join the local search parties. They told me I'd be scared. I convinced them to let me join just once, and my reaction to what I saw seemed to prove them right. They thought it was a sign of my trauma, but it wasn't. It was the cause. The big tree was gone. Where our initials were once etched into a monument of nature itself was now nothing. Emptiness. Of course, nobody knew the woods like me and Emily. Trees don't move, everyone told me. You're scared. It's okay, we all are, but trees don't move. It only took me 14 years to prove them wrong. The woods began their creeping a little over a month ago. I was getting ready for bed, yet as my glance fell over the window, I noticed a tree over the fence, one that was not there before. The first tree to take a midnight walk, at least, the first I had noticed in over a decade. I found myself watching expectantly, but expectant of what I'm not sure. I thought maybe I could catch it moving, morphing in the moonlit nighttime air. But it just stood there, staring back at me. Make no mistake, this tree was staring. No eyes to see, but staring all the same. It felt like it wasn't a part of the forest. A tree in a forest that it does not belong to is a curious thought to some, but a feeling I'm used to. Every night, when I went to bed, I would look out the window. More and more trees from the forest seemed to inch closer to my property. Each time, they stopped feeling like a part of the woods. Their membership to that club ends the moment they begin the move, they are their collective once they do. I didn't tell anyone, I wasn't even sure what to say. People thought I was crazy for implying that trees move as a child, imagine what they'd think if I said it now. But a fact not spoken is a fact all the same. There is a horrifying thing one learns about forests when they begin to shift, they make noise. I wish I could say that it was simply a rustling or creaking as they reroute to their new location. That would almost be peaceful. They make noises that get burnt into your brain, they screech, they roar, and they groan in pain. Their loud whispers whimper through the air every night, reminding us that they are on the move. Their mournful lullaby does everything but help me sleep, they instill a fear in me that I haven't truly felt for 14 years. I knew the noise was connected to Emily's disappearance all that time ago. I'm not the only one that hears the noises, although I'm the only one who truly listens to their meaning. Many of my neighbors have put their houses up for sale already because they cannot stand the nightly symphony of nature. That's what they call it. Nature. Nothing about this is natural. I knew the trees were specifically targeting me after just a week. Nobody else had trees at their window except me. Once at my home, at the edge of what I call my own, they stopped getting closer. They moved every night, continuing their echoes, but they did not break through my walls to reach me. The gentle tapping of branches upon my window had an eerie rhythm to it, as if someone were knocking, asking to be let in. I could almost feel their roots below the ground, beating like veins in flesh. It only took 2 nights of that before I decided to chop the branches. I knew they'd just grow back or move to a new position, but I needed to try it. That's when I discovered why the expansion of our town was cancelled. Blood dripped from the branches as I cut them. This was not sap, this was red, oozing blood. It smelled metallic, and groans could be heard from deep within the forest with every chop of my tools. I had become the conductor of this symphony. For every chop, a loud, horrific screech echoed throughout the woods. It only took 5 before I couldn't continue. You may have noticed that I haven't referred to it as Inwood for a while. That's because, as far as I'm concerned, this is no longer Inwood. There is not a single tree that has remained in its spot. They have all chosen to disconnect themselves from Inwood by moving inwards, towards our town and my life. I'd considered selling with my neighbors, but despite all the new questions I had, this was the closest I had ever come to answering Emily's disappearance. Last week, I had a dream. I hadn't dreamt in a while, or even slept much for that matter. I dreamt of Emily, now an adult, playing among the trees. We had gone into the woods together to remind ourselves of our childhood. Isn't this fun? Emily spoke with an unclear voice in this dream, almost groaning. But I could still understand her. This is, I said, vaguely aware of the real world, acutely knowing that I was sleeping. I just wish you could really be here. Perhaps I never left. Perhaps I've been trying to find my way back to you. We stared at each other before she spoke again. Perhaps you can join me. I jolted awake to the sound of the tapping at my window and the distant choir of the forest. Yet something about this tapping felt different, almost more excited than usual. It scraped along my window after each one, as if to no longer ask to come in, but instead to invite me outside. I peeked through the window. Many of the trees had moved away from my home. Only one was right outside. I was still tired, and my vision felt crooked, but I could clearly make out the letters engraved into the bark. W.E. For a second, I felt calm. I felt the fear of the past 14 years drift away. Emily? I spoke aloud. The forest responded with whispers that felt more gentle this time. I made my way downstairs and out the back of the house. I walked right up to the big tree and placed my hand over our initials. For just a moment there was peace, the groans stopped, as did the tapping of the window. I felt a pressure tightening in my hand, at the surface of my palm and fingertips. A creaking sound came not from the forest, but from this very spot on the big tree. It was growing around my hand, it wanted me to join it. It wanted me to become a part of the woods, my veins tangling with the roots and my thoughts tangling with the leaves. I pulled away, bits of skin tearing from the outer layers of my hand. The pain I felt was shared, the creaking returned from the forest. Louder than I had ever heard it. The forest is not Emily. Emily would not put me in a position like that. She would not ask me to give up my life to become something I am not. I believe the woods have tangled with Emily's memories. That which she was fond of is now what the trees are fond of. Pieces of her mind scattered across Inwood the day she vanished, but her soul is not there. A collective network of trees has been given the gift of thought. And it is terrifying. Several years ago, I was hiking during the summer/late afternoon in the Snoqualmie Pass area, near the Pacific Crest Trail. I hiked up a mountain in the area where I've been before, made it to the top, and, when it started to get dark, started to head back to my car. I had a pack with food/supplies, 2 flashlights, and a GPS. It was around 9:30 p.m. and pitch black out. I navigated through the woods back to the car, about a 3-mile walk. When I reached the 2-mile mark, I could hear something coming up behind me. I turned the flashlight around, and there was this older man, gray-bearded, wearing khaki pants, a polo shirt, and boat shoes with no flashlight or pack. He looked like he just came from the yacht club. He mentioned that he likes to just go out and get lost and that his family doesn't care. We were in the middle of nowhere, and nobody else was remotely close by. I walked back to the trailhead with this guy, talking along the way, and said, "Be safe," to him before departing. Once I got back in the car and climbed in, I looked back, and he was nowhere to be found. My car was the only one left, and the drive from the trailhead to I-90 is at least 5 miles down a winding, gravel road. This was over 10 years ago, and it has stuck with me ever since. He didn't have any food or water, was not dressed for hiking uneven/mountainous terrain, and had no flashlight, or even a phone that I could see. I have no idea how he could see his way around without a light source or moonlight. My dad walked into the woods in a trance. We found him at an old graveyard. He said he was taken to a tree that holds the key to heaven. This happened a few years ago, and I can't stop thinking about it. My dad has a history of mental health struggles, but nothing like this has ever happened before. He wasn't in a bad place mentally at the time, and nothing in the days leading up to it suggested he was unstable or delusional. He was just normal. And then he wasn't. It was late at night. We were all at home. My dad got up from his chair without a word and walked straight out the back door. Not fast. Not panicked. He appeared to be heading to a familiar location. We called after him, but he didn't respond. After a few minutes, when he didn't come back, we went looking. We found him about half an hour later. He was standing in an old, overgrown graveyard that's deep in the woods behind our property. He had no shoes on. He was standing completely still between 2 headstones with his eyes wide open, just staring at something none of us could see. He didn't respond when we spoke. He didn't even blink. We were about to call 911 when suddenly he gasped, looked right at us, and whispered, "I almost had it." When we got him home, he was quiet for a while. Then he started talking, not scared, not confused, just flat and calm, like he was describing something that had already happened. He said someone had walked him into the woods. He doesn't know who or what it was, only that it didn't feel human, but it didn't feel threatening either. It felt old, he said. Like it had always been there. He said the woods changed. The trees weren't right. The sky was blank. And in the middle of everything was a huge tree, dead looking but alive. No leaves. Just keys. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands, swaying gently even though there was no wind. Each key was different. Some were small and silver, others were rusted, old-fashioned, even handmade. He said every person has a key. And you have to catch yours to get into heaven. There were other people there, standing around the tree. Not talking. Just watching. A Civil War soldier. A woman could be heard humming softly. A child holding nothing in their hands. They weren't ghosts exactly. They weren't alive either. He said they looked like people in waiting. The tree started shaking. He said his key began to glow, not with light, but with recognition. The tree appeared to recognize him. He tried to climb. He made an effort to reach it. But right before he could touch it, He heard us calling him from the woods. And everything stopped. He doesn't know if he was supposed to come back. He doesn't know if he failed something. But the part that chills me is what he said last. I wasn't scared. I believe I should return someday. The experience wasn't a hallucination. This wasn't just an episode. I saw the look in his eyes when we found him in that graveyard. He wasn't there. He was somewhere else. I've tried looking into stories of trees with keys or visions like this but haven't found much. Has anyone else heard of something like this? I don't know if it was spiritual, paranormal, or something else entirely. I just know it felt real, and I believe him. When I was 15, my parents made the decision that they wanted to build their own farmhouse in the southern pasture, doing away with the mistakes our old house had and improving on a few concepts. I, being the mountain boy I was ecstatic. I no longer had to trudge half a mile to my trap line, which was a mile down and a mile back, plus another half mile to get to the house and prepare for school. The trap line would be 200 yards from my front door. All big projects start somewhere, and ours started with water. See, we always had problems with iron water at our old house. It stained everything, changed how food tasted, and, God forbid, you had anything white. So Dad borrowed a bulldozer and an excavator from a friend for a few days, built a sturdy road down to the bottom, and dug footers for the house, but first we had to see if we could get a good well on the property. It's well known that a certain sect of my family could witch water and had an old drilling truck, but first, silver had to cross hands, a jug of good shine had to be shared, and the rest poured out afterwards, and me and my sister would see if we also had the gift. My cousins came down and checked the land with 3 things, a fresh forked peach limb, a pure silver pocket watch, and finally a set of heavy copper wires bent into an L. The peach limbs marked the prospects, the watch pole told the depth of the water, and the copper told of its purity. We kids had to stay up on the hill till they were done, and one by one, we were called down and instructed how to find water and mark it. My sister was down there about half an hour, and then I got the call. When I went down, I was given 4 flags, instructed how to do it, and set out with a peach limb. Where it pulled the hardest, I marked the spots while my dad and the cousins looked on from the truck. I was next given the pocket watch and told to tell them which one pulled the hardest. After that, I was given the copper tines and told to tell which one crossed the quickest. After much testing, I came up with the one weaving down through our sugar maple patch where we made maple syrup. Well, apparently I was dead on and was congratulated by all attending for my gift. But I digress, on to the creepy part. The next day they brought the rig up, trimmed some trees so they could stand it up, and started drilling on my spot. At 50 feet they hit water unexpectedly. Short job, right? Well, Dad had talked them into drilling a few holes in the creek through the bedrock so he could blast a few big holes in the creek for trout and a swimming hole. Well, he had already cleared out a road down to the creek, cleaned off a section of bedrock, diverted the creek to the other side, and prepped them a spot to drill. The creek is probably 30 feet wide from bank to bank and is easily crossed dry-footed in dog days but never goes completely dry. Well, they take the rig down, drive it through the pasture, turn it around, and back it out on the bedrock. Dad took the dozer and was clearing off a section on the other side of the pasture, and I was watching him for about an hour or 2 when my cousins came running up to my dad, yelling for him to come and pull them back up the bank. They weren't drilling any more holes in the damned creek bed. Some words were exchanged, and Dad backed the dozer down, hooked up to the rig, and dragged them back into the pasture. The weirdest thing was, they then set up the rig 50 yards from the creek and started drilling a test hole. When they got about 4 lengths down, they pulled it up and went back another 50 yards and drilled another, finally satisfied in what was going on. I, on the other hand, had walked around them and walked down to the creek to where they had just drilled. See, Dad couldn't turn all the creek against the hillside, not enough backfill and too much bedrock. What I saw was a drill hole down through the rock, with a small stream of water disappearing in it. Come to find out, they had hit an underground cavern at 6 feet, and it just went. It extended about 50 yards out into our pasture and maybe another 40 yards beyond that. We had to rearrange where we were putting the house, it came so far. We went back down to the creek with a tape measure. The tape measure maxed out, so we got a 100-foot tape and put it down, it maxed out. Got a spool of baler's twine, tied a rock to it, and put it into the hole. We all sat there for half an hour while Dad fed twine down into that hole off that spool. Finally he said, "Duck it, and cut the twine. It's too damn deep," he said. He gingerly drove the dozer back into the creek and smoothed everything up, covering the hole, and that was it. Dad passed away 7 years ago this October. I walked down to the creek and fished it this spring for a mess of brookies. The creek changed and scraped itself clean in a few sections this spring. One of the places it scraped clean was the bedrock where the hole is. Water is still flowing down that hole, it never filled up. We went camping last weekend. First trip in years, and we were really looking forward to it. We got to the site and set up, only to realize we're right next to a multiple family group, and they were kind of loud. I honestly wasn't that worried about it as long as they stayed where they were. Well, of course that didn't happen. Their kids and an unleashed Doberman kept wandering into the shared space by our spot. Each time, they approached us more slowly. We also have a dog, but I don't trust strange dogs, especially with no owner present. I had to keep putting my dog away. The family proceeded to get into a fight with the camp host because of their volume after 10. They were cursing and screaming, the dad shouting "Go end yourself" to the host. Later in the night I hear the dog creeping in the bushes by our tent. I go to look for it and shoo it away, and suddenly the man is there too. Like he had just been creeping around wasted. It was so weird. She tells him, "I know you're going through something, but we're all going through shit." Like, maybe they know each other? So now I'm worried he's a threat. They eventually go to bed, after screaming angrily at the children, poor kids, and we lie down, and there's their dog again sniffing at our tent, which alerts our dog, who now won't shut up because he hears something sniffing our tent and is alerting us. We shoo that dog away again, and there's no one out there with it, that we can see anyway. It seems like it's just running loose with no supervision. So after about half an hour of that, we say, "F it," and pack our stuff, and leave since it's 2 a.m. and we're not getting sleep. I was nervous that guy was out there creeping again. When we left, we drove by, and he was up sitting in their car. I don't see things that surprise me often. In these hills and hollows, I am rarely surprised. The longer you spend here, the fewer things around you truly surprise you. One animal that always surprises me is a cat. I was 9 when I realized that my mom's barn cat always ate the heads first on mice. I was 11 when I realized all cats do that, big and small. I was walking up the headwaters of a tributary of the Elk River. Elk River is a wild stream. It boils, rolls, and digs deep the holes that incur the full wrath of that river. The streams that feed the elk are steep, fast, and cold most of the year, but in August, everything heats up. Big trout escape the warming water by sneaking up any small streams not dried up and eating any fish or creature they can fit in their gullet. Seriously, I caught a brown just over 20 half a mile up a gully, in a stream you could stand on both sides. But I digress. I and a friend used to catch a ride with his older brother, a log truck driver. He would drop us off at one of those tributaries in the morning and pick us back up on his last trip of the evening. The only thing he would tell us was, "Watch out for rattlers, and have your ass beside the road at 5, or you're walking to Slatey." So with a sack lunch and fishing poles, we would take off into the shadowy hollows. Nub and I were leapfrogging up this long, rocky creek, catching brookies in every hole, fishing towards lunchtime at the head of the stream. I got a little away from Nub in a long, steep stretch of unfishable white water leading up to a set of falls. As I finally found a piece of land flat enough to rest above the falls, I looked around, and I saw something off about this laurel thicket, limbs bent the wrong way and leaves turned up like they were broken. I walked closer, and it looked like something grayish-white hanging way up in the tree. Nub finally caught up to me, bragging over the roar of the water about how he's caught, and released, over 47 on this stream and how there aren't any trout above those falls, and why do I always climb up and fish past them on dead water. And he saw me standing there, surprised. Nub stopped, caught his breath, and asked me why the hell I was staring at the sun. I said, "Shut up and look at that tree. What is hanging from it?" We walked closer, and it looked oddly familiar. That's when I realized it was deer hair. Hell, that's a deer carcass hanging up in that tree, an old one, but a carcass just the same. We couldn't figure out how it got way up there. It was close to noon, and we were a long way from the Hall Road. Let's eat lunch and start making our way down. I opened a can of Beanie Weenies and took out a bologna sandwich, while Nub opened 2 cans of pop and handed one to me. We sat 30 yards away from our conversation piece and ate lunch. After we satisfied our growling bellies, we sat and rested for a few minutes. Nub stood up to go wander off and take a piss. "How do you reckon that deer got up there?" he said. "Hell, I don't know, Nub, maybe it climbed up there and died, or something dragged it up there." I stood straight up. "Nub, did you ever know a bear to drag anything up a tree? Why would it? Nothing is running a bear off a whole deer on the ground, not coyotes, not hounds. Not another bear." When he turned around, I could see the fear all over him. We silently packed up lunch, broke down our poles, and commenced to get out of there as quickly and quietly as we could. We returned to the Hall Road an hour before his brother arrived, left a stick arrow to show we were walking out, and it started to rain. We were halfway back to the old mill when I heard that old triaxle rumbling up the haul road. We took shelter under an overgrown iron tree beside the road, not like it mattered, and waited for him to catch up. We climbed up in the truck, stashed our gear, and told him what we saw as he drove us out. We stopped at the mill to unload, and Nub's brother told us to come on, we have to talk to someone. We told our story to an older gentleman who worked at the mill, and he drove us back down the haul road and marked that hollow with a pink ribbon. Years later I found out that old man was a farmer, and he had been losing sheep for years and finding them hanging in the treetops, young calves too. We had stumbled into the hollow that cat called home. What he did to that cat, I know not, I don't want to know, but we never fished anything that ran into the elk until I got old enough to handle myself, never unarmed, and never alone. That was my first experience with big cats. A strange, creepy man living near the camp area kept talking to us and hovering nearby, 3 women camping in rural Victoria, Australia. Weird one regarding camping etiquette, as we didn't really know how to approach the situation without just straight up leaving. We found a beautiful spot, we researched it online before going, that was easy for us to access in the cars we had. Had well-maintained drop-loos and fire pits as well as a gorgeous river to swim and fish in. Anywhere else would have been too dangerous to access without a kitted 4WD, and if we had to move, it'd be at least a 2-hour drive on some pretty sketchy roads. The spot was empty when we arrived except for someone that appeared to be in a semi-permanent setup in the thicker bush area. We chose to give them some privacy and camp on the other side. We saw the man staying there walk by and just gave him a wave. He appeared to be quite friendly. Just as we finished setting up our tents, we saw him emerge wearing nothing but shorts with an axe over his shoulder. He walked slowly towards us, and we immediately assume he's planning to end us, because honestly, it was a scene out of a horror movie. Thankfully, he just informs us he's pinching some wood from a nearby spot and carries on. Okay. Cool. Weird and tactless, but yeah, all good, my friend. Maybe 30 minutes later, he walks by again and decides to have a conversation. He's strange, but we agree he's harmless, despite us all having a consistent bad feeling about him. He appeared to be homeless, given that he had resided in that location for a year. Honestly, he sounded a bit lonely and just really wanted to talk. When the conversation died, he didn't leave. He just stood there and kind of stared at us. We carried on doing what we were doing, but he just kept standing there and randomly saying small statements that we lazily acknowledged to show that we wanted to go back to enjoying our time relaxing. So, maybe he's just a bit socially awkward? Autistic, even? Apologies if this generalization is offensive in any way, I genuinely wondered if he had autism. He eventually left, but this kept happening throughout the day, and it started getting exceptionally annoying, but we were too scared to ask him to leave in fear of abrupt retaliation. I wanted to just pack up and find somewhere else, but the others were adamant he'd get the picture eventually. Later in the evening he chose a fire pit closest to us and just sat there and kept walking past us for no real reason. It was equal parts irritating and creepy. Other people came by and camped nearby who also had their ears talked off by this guy, which thankfully drew him away from us, but they left the following day, which brought us back into his periphery. Additionally, we had my friend's big dog with us, which made us feel a little more at ease. The dog is an actual sweetheart but looked scary and really didn't like this man. He was growling and snarling at him whenever he came by, which he rarely does to anyone. Maybe he could tell we were tense whenever we saw him. The Indian Maze. Growing up, I was fortunate enough to live right at the edge of a very large nature preserve. Although the area was not open to the public, my neighborhood's location allowed me to access it through several lesser-known entrances, allowing me to explore at my leisure. Countless days of my childhood were spent hiking, swimming, and playing pretend with my best friend in these woods. The woods became like a second home to me. I felt like I knew every shortcut and secret cave, and I always felt at peace except for one exceptional instance that is the subject of this post. My best friend and neighbor, who I'll refer to as Jacob, knew these woods just as well as I did. We had several choice spots that we liked hiking to and a couple of makeshift forts that we made out of sticks and such. It is important to remember that life was simpler back then, and our parents had little reason to worry about us, as they were used to us disappearing for hours while we explored the woods. This was also before cell phones were a thing. One more important thing to note is that these woods were once home to Native Americans, more specifically the Comanche tribe. Oftentimes we would find arrowheads left by the natives or ancient cans and bits of supplies presumably left by the settlers who eventually discovered the area for themselves. We found this bit of history fascinating, and going in the woods sometimes felt like taking a step away from the modern world and going back to a different time. One afternoon Jacob and I packed up some water and snacks and set out into the woods like we had many times before. Usually we would stick to the trails or the creek so that we would be able to find our way back home easily. But today we had an urge to explore even deeper than we had gone before. We headed off the trail and into the uncharted areas of the preserve that even our parents hadn't taken us to before. Things were fine at first, but we soon realized that the trees had gotten incredibly dense. It became increasingly difficult to walk, as dead tree branches seemed to reach and claw at us every step of the way. We both found ourselves a sturdy stick and used this as a machete, chopping and carving ourselves a path through the trees. There was no longer any trail to be found. But we didn't care, we were invincible kids who knew these woods well. What could possibly go wrong? We had been proceeding like this for probably about 15 or 20 minutes when we got a horrible feeling. That horrible feeling that we're being watched. Jacob and I exchanged glances almost simultaneously, and he remarked, "Do you sense that?" I responded affirmatively, acknowledging that I felt it as well. "Yeah," I said. "I feel it." We both felt that something was wrong, but we couldn't explain it. We both felt that someone or something was watching us. We quickly agreed that it was time to head back. We turned around and started making our way back, but after several minutes we started having doubts that we knew where we were. The woods were dense here, denser than any other part of the preserve we had seen. And it was nearly impossible to move. We were getting exhausted from hacking away tree branches and decided to stop for a break and try to get our bearings. At that moment, we realized there was something else wrong. It was completely silent, save for our labored breathing. These woods, normally teeming with life, were absolutely still. I still haven't experienced anything like it to this day. We couldn't hear a single bug, or a bird, or the rushing water of the creek. It was suddenly dead here. These comfortable woods that we were so familiar with suddenly felt alien and hostile. We continued to experience a sense of surveillance, though a more accurate term would be stalking. Jacob and I were absolutely done with the adventure by this point. We had completely lost our way, and we couldn't discern whether we were returning the way we had come. He tried to climb a tree to see where we were, but it was too difficult. He would have to break dozens of branches just to get a couple of feet off the ground, and these trees were tall. The branches were so thick that they blocked out the sun at times. When climbing the tree failed, we both started yelling in hopes that someone might hear us. But the only reply we got was the oppressive silence of the woods. It was at this moment of desperation that we spotted something through the trees, probably about 20 or so yards away. Out of the corner of our eyes, we clearly saw an adult-sized figure, which quickly moved behind a tree once we spotted it. Jacob and I traded one brief and panicked look at each other and bolted in the opposite direction of the figure. We sprinted like human wrecking balls through the branches, no longer taking the care to carve ourselves a nice, safe path. Branches clawed and scraped at our legs, arms, and faces as our flight instinct kicked into overdrive. My lungs burned, but I did not care. At one point Jacob, who was wearing our backpack full of water and snacks, got snagged on a particularly big branch. I stopped to help untangle him as fast as I could, and we kept sprinting, not daring to look back behind us. A few times I might have heard something breaking branches as it followed us, but I can't be certain. We continued running for what felt like ages. In reality we ran for what was probably 15 or 20 minutes. When we finally broke through the tree line and into a clearing, I was so relieved that I could have cried. I wish that the story ended here so that I could chalk it up to the overactive imagination of two stupid lost kids, but I can't. Because it turns out this clearing was essentially the backyard of a very large and very old two-story house. A house that we didn't know existed until now. Decades-old blue paint peeled off the exterior. The roof was missing several shingles, many of which were lying in the overgrown grass below. The house had several large windows that were caked with grime. A single dirt road made its way from the front of the house and up a small hill where we couldn't see where it led to. It was obvious that this house wasn't part of our neighborhood, or any neighborhood we had been to before for that matter. Jacob and I were half terrified and half in awe of our discovery. This house felt like our own personal discovery after a perilous quest. A bit of our fear from the woods evaporated as we summoned the courage to investigate this house. We walked up to the side of the house that was on our left and peered through the dirty window and into the strange house. The first floor seemed to consist of mainly one large room. Along the wall opposite us was a wooden staircase leading to the second floor. The first floor was completely devoid of any furniture, no tables or chairs or couches or anything. Just dozens upon dozens of broken bottles. Shards of glass covered almost the entirety of the first floor, as well as a few yellowed books and magazines that were sprawled open, some with pages clearly ripped out and lying next to them. And in the center of the room was a single sleeping bag, filthy from what we could see, with an unlit candlestick standing next to it. What are you all doing? I nearly shat myself in horror. We immediately pulled away from the window and saw that a man had walked around from the right side of the building and was now standing about 15 feet away from us. He was wearing nothing except for some dirty denim overalls. He had scarred skin that looked like rough leather. And his eyes. Neither of his eyes was looking in the same direction, and neither one was looking directly at either of us. Everything about this man looked wrong. You know how some people you can just feel their energy? It's hard to describe, but this guy just felt so wrong in every way. We were frozen in place, surprised and terrified by his appearance. We stared at him for a moment until Jacob found words to speak. "We're, just checking out the house," he said sheepishly. The stranger seemed to take a moment to digest his response before gesturing to the woods and saying, "You should head back the way you came. You never know." And he just let that last sentence hang in the air. You never know. Jacob, God bless him, quickly thought of something to say while I stared in absolute terror. "Actually, we need to head to the road, our parents will be expecting us soon." The man did not reply. He just stood there with his mouth slightly open, his eyes dancing off in different directions. It seemed like he was thinking hard about something. We didn't waste another second getting out of there. We walked as quickly as we could towards the front of the house and made our way up the dirt driveway, trying not to appear panicked. I say driveway because there were no cars at the house, not even a garage. The front of the house consisted of a porch that was also littered with old cans, broken bottles, and yellowed pages from old magazines. We felt the man's eyes boring into our backs as we trudged up the driveway. It was rather long, and once we rounded the first corner and were out of sight of the house, we started running again. Eventually we reached a paved road. There was no mailbox or address that we could see. We followed this paved road for quite a while. It felt like ages before we could begin to recognize where we were again. Turns out we had gone through the entire nature preserve and were on the complete other side from where our neighborhood was. It took the rest of the afternoon to walk back home, but we made it safe and sound without incident. We didn't tell our parents what had happened because we were afraid they'd restrict our freedom and not let us go into the woods again. We didn't go into the woods again for a few weeks. And when we did go back, we rarely left the trails, and we never went into that area again. To this day Jacob is still convinced that something paranormal is going on there, that we found ourselves in the midst of things both unfathomable and dangerous. We're both usually pretty realistic and grounded people, but I'm inclined to agree with him. I'm still not sure if the feelings of dread/spookiness in the woods and the house/man are related in any way. I doubt I'll ever know. And ever since that day we referred to that strange and forbidden area of the woods as the Indian Maze. Cemetery at night. This event occurred a while ago, in 2013, I believe, and I have never received anyone's opinion on it other than from my family, who were all present with me and experienced the same thing. We were in Colorado up in the mountains near Blackhawk/Central City. We all went to some casinos and had a good time doing that, and my mom, being the adventurous type that she is, thought it would be fun to go to a haunted cemetery after it got dark to have some fun and potentially have a good scare. So we agreed and left Blackhawk and went farther into the mountains, heading to the cemetery she had looked up earlier in the day. The road after a while was getting smaller and smaller and eventually turned into a dirt road. This cemetery was definitely deep in the woods. We pull up to the cemetery, surrounded by trees, and it was very dark. We were the only ones there, of course. We all get out with a couple flashlights and go through the gate and start walking around. We kind of all split up depending on who had a flashlight, but the cemetery was pretty small, so we were all still relatively close to each other. After a while of looking at the graves and talking about how old this place was and the people, we all pretty much agreed that nothing was happening and decided that it was time to go. We all slowly get into the SUV and are taking our time with leaving, as we aren't in any rush. The car was running, and we were just sitting there talking. Then, completely out of the blue, there was a very obvious and loud thud that came from underneath the car. It shook the car and scared the shit out of all of us. My aunt, who was driving the car, put it in drive as fast as she could and floored it. All of us were yelling, "WTF was that?" As we were driving, we were, of course, trying to figure out what the hell just happened, because we all agreed we felt it come from the bottom side of the SUV, and it was loud enough and shook the car enough that it couldn't have been a pine cone or a branch hitting the car or something. It definitely couldn't have been an animal, as no animal that could have hit it hard enough to shake it at all could have fit the small space under the SUV, and we were struggling trying to figure it out. I was sitting in the very back of the SUV at the time and literally felt the impact on my feet. Since nothing had happened, it was pretty crazy. We all agreed that whatever happened, it was very strange, and none of us had experienced anything like it before. I've always been skeptical of ghosts and things like that, as I've always been a person that goes on things I can prove and that has empirical evidence. But this was something that I really wasn't able to explain. I was just thinking about it recently and figured, why not get other people's opinions on this? Thank you for listening. Mount Misery and Shawnee Curse. Hello everyone. I am a local of Ohio, and to be more precise, Logan County, Ohio. I have lived here all of my life, and it is, in my opinion, one of the most stellar looking states in our nation. All 4 of our seasons are vivid, and the landscape varies in many ways, from rolling valleys to flat farmland. I have always loved history, and in recent years, I have become intrigued by my local history, discovering both bitter and sweet aspects of it. In our area, or in my town of Bellefontaine, we have a rich history of native peoples, the Shawnee. When I was 12, my mother had married a local farmer, and we moved to his farm. I was rather sad to leave the town that I knew and loved, but I was excited by the prospect of living in the countryside and being able to have animals, which in town was not allowed. The farm itself looks, well, about like any other farm in the area. Big red barn, long rows of fences, a big garden, cows grazing the pasture, chickens eating bugs in the yard. After a few weeks of getting used to the farm, I became pretty fond of it in some ways. I had lots of space to play, I got my first flock of chickens that I wanted so badly, we did our very first big garden, and much more. As time went on, though, things got darker and darker. We did some digging about the history of our farm, and we found out the farm sat atop an execution site for both the natives and the whites. Also, the finding at our local library in the small town a mile away from the farm was that our woods on an old map the library had was called Mount Misery, a name that was well deserved for what I was about to encounter. My first encounter. It was a day like any other on the farm, and part of that was cleaning out the henhouse. I hated the job, however, having the chickens at the time was well worth it. About halfway through, I drove my pitchfork into the manure, walked out the side door of the barn, and was about to toss it into the manure spreader. However, before I could turn my body to make the thrust, a dog appeared a few feet away. I stood frozen, and I felt my face throb and my skin turn cold. On closer inspection, it was a very large coyote-looking creature, tan, tall, and lanky, staring into my soul. I wanted to throw my pitchfork into the dog, but I could not get myself to move. It stared at me for about 5 seconds before slowly turning its head away and beginning to move. It walked in the most unsettling way, as if it was out of an early 90s 3D animation, and to my amazement, it walked through the fence. I could not believe the chickens were unaware of its presence, and they did not even notice it the whole time. I dropped the pitchfork and ran inside, wanting to burst into tears. I told my mom. She figured it was a Kai dog, but they never come that close to humans, nor do they walk through fences like a hologram. My second encounter. I have always had a love for fishing and wanted to fish so bad that I would be content with any stream, brook, creek, or whatever. My father told me that in the woods there was a creek. I had a huge smile on my face and, with great energy, went to my bedroom, grabbed my tackle box and pole, and asked, "Where is the creek?" He gave directions, and I headed out the door to the creek. It was a good walk in our woods. Although I had never been back there alone and felt a bit scared, I reminded myself that fishing is fishing, and being true to myself, I wouldn't let a good opportunity slip away. It was a very steep walk down since I had to walk through our 2 pastures, which were quite hilly and full of rose bushes and rocks. I got to a thing of fence that was held to the metal post with some old clothes hanger wire. I untied the wire, passed through the makeshift gate, and followed the narrow, overgrown path. After a few, I found the creek, and it was a sorry sight. Maybe 2 inches deep and not one stinking fish. Broke an entire pole trying to make a shake of the wrist cast. After 10 minutes of what felt like making a fool of myself, I wrapped my broken pole in fishing line and went about my way home, and little did I know I was about to experience something that to this day disturbs me. I walked on the path, birds sang, wind blew, the sound of summer was in the air, and then complete and utter silence. To my shock, I also no longer knew where I was. It was like when you dream and you go from scene to scene. I instantly felt dread and the sensation of being watched and began to cry, but I was so scared I could not even produce tears. I fast walked wherever I could walk, and I came across a sight that made it all seem ever so much worse. A practice dummy for a crossbow or compound bow had its head severed, and beneath a large tree, there were tidy piles of animal bones. At that moment I murmured, "Jesus help me. Jesus help me, please," and fast walked and felt the presence of something towering over me. I did not look back and just kept moving until I came to the edge of the woods, at the other side of the farm. I ran into the pasture and ran back to the house, crying for my mother, ran through the back door, and began to cry uncontrollably. I told my parents what had happened, and from that day I became terrified of the woods and never went into it alone again until 9 years later, and even then I went into the point where I still could see the pasture behind me. I have gone on maps to see how I could have gone that far and made it to where I did. My third encounter. We had cows, and all were Jersey cows. They come in a few colors but mainly brown or tan. Ours were dark brown and tan. From our tractor shop, you can see the upper pasture and the woods, or at least the woods in the upper half. I was out playing when I saw many dark, black cows in the pasture grazing. I thought, since when did we get all these black cows? So I went inside and asked my mom about the cows. She said, "We have not gotten any more," and I told her about the cows. I returned to the shop, only to find them gone. I still do not know what they meant or why I only saw them, but ever since then I have always counted our cows much closer. My fourth encounter. I refer to this as an encounter, although it is more accurately described as a collection of incidents related to animal deaths. On this farm I have witnessed many things, but none got to my psyche and my heart more than the brutal deaths of animals. The farm at night could be described as something like a horror survival game, but instead of virtual characters, it's your beloved animals and their fight for survival. Another thing was strange behavior among the animals. For instance, my father had to beat to death a raccoon that walked on 2 legs and consumed multiple piglets, not one but I believe almost half of the litter. We had a beloved dog that began to follow us with his head down and stare with ill intent in his eyes. He tried to end our other dog and had to be put down. I would have cats that stared at me, and I would clap my hands or make loud sounds, but they would sit like a statue and stare. We had a pig that ate every last one of her piglets and then threw herself over the gate and almost consumed my infant brother. If my mother had not been there, he would have been the next victim. We sometimes found animals with broken necks, as if they had gone mad and were bashing their heads into something hard, or something just snapped them. I had lost so many animals that when I found another dead, I just shrugged it off, thinking it was fate. My fifth encounter. Growing up, I became weathered and was almost never fazed by what I saw. I even started to make jokes about it to reduce its intimidation factor. However, this did not stop me from having even an air conditioner running during the winter, so I had constant white noise. However, one night I went to hit the hay and began to fall asleep, and then I heard what I thought was a car going down our road with bass boosters. Around here it's common for morons to fly down our road at night and play NASCAR. However, the sound did not increase and then fade away as it typically would. In fact, it was in the barn lot, and it sounded like a native drumbeat, like at the local festival, and I began to be uneasy and sat up, and at that point the drumming stopped. I then heard footsteps crunching on the gravel, and it was walking toward my window. I thought it was my dad doing night chores, but I realized he was in bed. At this point I knew it was not him or even human. And then I heard someone whisper in the window through the gap where the AC unit had a plastic flap that extended so it would fit better, and since it was off since this was during the fall, I could hear everything outside. As soon as it spoke, I felt instantly cold and in slow motion, sick, heavy, as if my blood was thick and unable to move, and I could do nothing. The language it spoke was Old Tongue, and not one I've heard. After about a minute of listening to the damn thing whisper, I threw myself out of bed and was so weak I wiggled like a noodle to my parents' door. I opened their door, and I mumbled out in a loud, muffled cry, "Hey! There's someone at my window." I almost couldn't speak, and when my mom came into my room, it was very cold, and she said, "There is something very off." She prayed with me, and I went back to bed and had a horrible time falling asleep, and when I woke up, I went under my window, and not a trace of anything being there was to be found. Remember, whatever spoke into my window had to be 7.5 feet tall, so no human could have done it. Plus, our geese sleep under my window, and they honk at the slightest sound. My sixth encounter. I have always loved old things, and finding them yourself is even better. My father, who operates a sawmill in our largest barn, cuts wood both for sale and for our construction projects. He became frustrated with purchasing saw blades because some of the trees contain nails or similar debris in the wood. So he purchased a metal detector to find them before he put a log into the sawmill. I asked if I could go with it and look for stuff in the pasture since there is a lot of old junk that was buried out there. His grandfather used to bury various items in the ground, and I believed I might discover something valuable, such as old tools. I went down in the lower pasture and headed down the bog, where a great deal of the stuff would have been buried. I headed down, and to my amazement it started clicking, and I followed the source until I came to a tall but rather skinny tree that was bent over. However, joy turned into dread very quickly. In the tree there were knots of my mom's missing cat's fur tied on the branches. I was repulsed at the sight and then turned to the edge of the woods and knew I was on its turf. I then got that feeling of when you should leave when you get into it with someone and think things might get ugly. I walked back to the farm, not sure how I was going to tell Mom about her cats and their fate. I got halfway up the hill and turned around, and on the edge of the forest, I saw something to this day that disturbs my soul and also brings about an anger that could only be aimed at something so horrid. A long, lanky figure on all fours was looking at me, and it was by far one of the most unsightly things I have ever set eyes on. The skin encircled its body in a way that resembled a starved dog or, to a certain extent, a cat. Its skin was pale and the color of light tobacco ash. Its head was that of a human, but the skin was so tight it looked more like a skull with skin, and its eyes were so far back in its sockets you could not even see them. The part that I found most odd was the back legs were bowed to such an extent it was almost like a frog. I was in a flight or fight moment, and for once in my life, after I had been through years of loss and despair, I became angry with blazing fury and threw my right fist in the air and then pointed at it and screamed, "I know you're there." And immediately it jumped, almost in a cartoon-like manner, like a frog into the shrubbery, and it was gone. I have never seen it since, and I still have no idea what it was, but after years and countless animals dead, nights spent sleepless, and fears that landed me in mental institutions, I wanted my voice to be heard and to make known that I had it. Now, by no means have I ever gone into the woods to look for it, and I still am not sure why I did what I did. I know I was sad to see Mom in the state she was after losing very beloved cats that meant a lot to her. I assumed it was the reason why her cats went missing, and be assured if I had a gun, I would have shot at it even if it did nothing. However, I am sure being what it was, you can't destroy spiritual things with man-made weapons.